Raven feels a scream through folded time, a hymn of iron and prayer being strangled, and she knows a world is burning where hope is a crime. Robin weighs the risk against their oath to protect those who cannot call them by name, and decides they will answer anyway. Cyborg tunes a stolen hive resonator to Raven's heartbeat, locking a lattice across coordinates no map admits. Starfire feeds it with solar fire, Beast Boy bracing the circle as a woolly mammoth against the surge. On the fifth breath, the circle snaps outward, and the breach takes them. They arrive not with thunder but with absence, a hole punched in Armageddon's orange sky where the eye wants a sun. Hive Helsreach unrolls beneath them like a rust cathedral. Spires and smokestacks and shrine domes stitched to a continent of industry. Lightning crawls along the breach rim and licks Raven's shoulders. Her cloak drinks it like grief. The air tastes of promethium and incense. Vox traffic claws at them, panicked, overlapping. Ruin song in the lower transept. PDF 34th pinned on bridge gantry 7. Arbite's precinct sealed. Authorized immolation pending. Litanies thread through the noise. Metronome prayers to saints whose statues glare from niche and buttress. A siren tower turns and catches Robin in its red wash like a target. He adjusts. We triage, he says, and points. Big fire, falling metal, screaming crowd. We stop what kills first. A bulk hauler the size of a chapel peels out of the transit spine above the manufactorum of blessed teeth. Engines torched by something inside. It skews toward a Hab district balcony, whose edge is already soft with heat. Hundreds cling to rails in the wash of burning plascrete. Cyborg locks his forearm into the rail of a maintenance gantry, as if he's wrestling a mountain. Vector realignment, he mutters. Voice filtered. Armature irising. Give me 3 seconds and no rift flare. Raven moves past him, palms out, eyes eclipsing. Azarath Metrian. She doesn't finish. The syllables of a focus, not spectacle. The soul self spills like night in water and cups the hauler's nose cone. Starfire arcs alongside, hair a comet tail, hands glowing with controlled sun. Beast Boy drops like a green peregrine, hits as a tyrannosaur, and braces a crumpling buttress with his back and a roar that shivers soot from the cornices. Stone groans, pins shear, a saint's finger falls and smashes a vending kiosk into incense. The hauler's belly misses the balcony by a meter. The air turns to knives as the heat wave splits around Raven's shadow like it is a cliff. Her jaw trembles. Cyborg's repulsor coughs, veils, coughs again, then bites, dragging the hauler's vector 3 degrees until it kisses a sloped spillway and scrapes, throwing sparks like meteors across a stained glass wall. He grins once, sharp. Got you. The crowd spills inward over the balcony rail, sobbing, blistered, alive. Starfire lands among them and the heat crawling on their shoulders recedes as a corona around her. She takes the brunt on her own skin without noise. She smells like burnt sugar. Above, the hole in the sky yanks tight and leaves a bruise. Raven staggers. The lattice Cyborg built around her is intact. Yes, but it drinks at the edges of her, tugging like low tide on veins. Robin is there before she falls, a hand at her elbow that makes no claim beyond balance. Cost, she whispers, as if naming it lessens it. I can hold the path anchored, but it will take pieces. We'll budget, he says, eyes scanning. He means time, blood, will, whatever is coin where they are. Sirens spiral inward. A wing of Valkyrie gunships roars across the spire line, and a dreadnought broadcaster magnifies a woman's voice until it shakes rivets. To the PDF elements on Gantry 7. Hold fast. Reinforcements incoming. By the Governor Militant's seal. Helsreach will not fall to whispers. An Arbite's walkway booms flat black under armored boots. The judge at its point carries a shock more like a verdict. Smoke winds around her Aquila badge. She sees Starfire, sees the green tyrant shrinking to a boy, sees the machine man and the girl with a night cape, and the boy in a domino. She does not lower her weapon. "In the Emperor's name," she calls, voice steady as an oath. "Identify." Robin steps forward into the megaphone wash without flinching. "We're here to help," he says, because sometimes the most useful thing is the true thing. He doesn't give a lineage, a jurisdiction, or a code. Those would be lies here. One of the rescued, face blistered and eyes burning, stumbles up and grabs the Arbite's van brace. "Marshal," he croaks, "they pulled us out of the fire, please." The Arbite's gaze shifts from supplicant to Titans and back. A calculus ticks behind the visor. Somewhere in that dark equation, mercy's weight counts. She lowers them all a fraction. "Then help earns hearing," she says. "PDF General Maela Kest has command. Inquisitorial presence on world. If you are witches, you will kneel when you are told." Raven's expression does not change. "We are not your enemy," she says without bowing, and the Arbites reads the tone. Neither compliance nor contempt, only a fact asserted gently. More vox. A new thread bites the air, cleaner, drilled. Gantry 7 is failing. Enemy signal. Cult him. Binary layer underneath. Looks like coordination beyond rabble. Confirm word bearers can't. The Arbite's head turns toward the voice source, the machine altar of a Vox node. She snaps to decision. "You," she tells Robin, "move with me. Bring your team. Save mouths now. Explain mouths later." They run. Gantry 7 is an iron bridge between two giant smelters with a river of slag beneath. The heat so intense it bends sight. A knot of PDF troopers is cowering behind an overturned loading cart as bullets stitch rivet heads into dust. On the far side, a crowd is penned at a gate whose cogitator is red with error messages and bleeding sparks. Something in the fog on that side laughs like a choir in a drain. Cyborg folds into a firing cradle. "Suppressing," he calls, and his shoulder opens like a basil flower. He does not kill. He disassembles cover, punches holes in firing arcs, erases hands that hold detonators with precision bursts that leave the arms attached and the owners screaming but alive. Starfire rises into the slag haze and becomes a beacon. Fire flows around her, eddies, loses will. Shots hit her like hail and crackle out. Beast Boy bolts on all fours as a dire wolf, then is a man again, sliding on his side under a strut to come up inside the penned crowd. "With me if you want not to die," he says, simple, almost cheerful, and takes the weight of the stuck gate with his back as a rhinoceros. The metal screams and moves. Robin clocks a symbol chalked on a pillar. 8-pointed star scratched over a cog, fresh, still shedding dust. The pieces click. He throws 3 discs across a gap. They bite steel, spit microfilament, make a tight line where there was air. He runs on it, a straight arrow above a boiling orange river. He sees the word priest on the other side through the heat. Shimmer. A robed figure with chains at the wrist, and a mouth sewn except for where the stitches have ripped from strain. The priest's vox amp is grafted into bone. The hymn thrums under the gunfire, a call to knives in human hearts. Robin drops down on the priest from the sound shadow of a cooling fan, wrenches the amp aside, and rams a flashbang down the throat of the chant. It detonates, white and clean. The hymn cuts off mid-invective. Raven flickers to his side, cloak a cupping of night air, and touches 2 cultists' foreheads with 2 fingers each. Their eyes roll white. They slump, pulse alive, rage untethered. She bleeds at the nose and doesn't wipe it. The world breathes. The PDF rise and advance, disciplined in misery. The penned crowd pours through the gate under Beast Boys straining. Out and down a maintenance stair that shakes but holds. A shape crawls up from the slag like a spider with engines for a thorax, its legs barbed with ritual nails. It is a demon engine in miniature, a test piece dragged here through the chant. It smiles with a furnace. Starfire is first to meet it, hands together, a single wide beam that is not quite a weapon and not at all mercy. The beam carves the barbs from its legs and melts its grin. It wails in metal and retreats, a ruined thing with smoke for pride. Raven's shadow pours into the engine as it tries to scuttle back, touches the place where the warp is stapled to iron, and pinches. The connection breaks with a pop that the ear cannot hear, but the bones do. Codex note. The foe's miniaturized demon engine collapses when its warp bind is severed. Such binds obey metaphor more than metal and crack under precise denial. The Arbeitsmarschall, name on her pauldron krell, steps up beside Robin and studies the scene with a judge's hollow patience. "You fight like heretics who remember being human," she says. It is not an insult or a compliment. It is a category. "We fight like we want them to live," Robin says, and jerks his chin toward the crowd now flowing away under Beast Boy's guard. He looks at Raven and measures, color back in her lips, tremor shallow, hands steady, a cost but paid. General Kest is setting a perimeter at the Cathedral of Titan's Mercy, Marshal Krell says. Inquisitor Severine Holt is en route. The way she says the name is a warning and a hope in one. They move as a wedge through service tunnels lined with devotional plaques gone grey with smoke. Vox traffic tightens as they approach Central Command. Robin catches fragments like glints between waves. Ordo Hereticus, clear a lane. Black Templars probing the southern sally. Word-bearers hymn shifting. Binary echo audible to auto-senses only. At the cathedral, the front doors are banded in wrought iron and saints in relief, half of whom are armoured and half-lensed. The plaza before it is a triage field lit by lumen strips and burning devotional candles the size of children. Medici and sisters of some order in ash-white habits move like ghosts between cots. A woman in carapace with a crimson sash stands on the steps and speaks into 3 channels at once. Vox, human ears, and the swell of courage that a certain kind of spine radiates. "General Kest," Marshal Krell says, and salutes. Kest looks the Titans over, as if they were another machine. Function first, origin later. Her eyes linger on Raven and on Cyborg's augmetics, on Starfire's glow and Beast Boy's twitching edges. Her mouth hardens, then eases, then hardens again. "We are dying," she says without preface. "We are also stubborn. If you can push, push. If you can heal, heal. If you can do neither, then do not clutter my drill space." Robin nods. "We can do all 3, for now." A second voice knifes sideways through the calm, too level, too observant. "And if what you can do disturbs the Emperor's peace." The Inquisitor does not loom. She is not tall. She is also not ignorable. Inquisitor Severine Holt wears a coat whose lining is rumour and a rosette like a verdict. Her hair is pinned in a style that could be a concession or a trap. She studies Raven the way a surgeon studies a tumour that might also be a heart, which, she says without heat, as one might say tool or weapon. Name. The plaza goes quiet in the way a city does when lightning strikes very far away. "Raven," Raven says. She does not offer more. She does not hide the blood on her lip. She does not look away. And the rest. Robin, Starfire, Cyborg, Beast Boy. He lists them like proprieties, his posture unyielding but without defiance. He is polite because he chooses to be, not because he is asked. I see you held back, Holt says, and flicks her gaze toward the smoke smear where the demon engine died. That mercy may save souls or damn them. In either case, it is my remit to decide. Your remit, Kes says tightly, is to keep Helsreach breathing long enough to have a tribunal. Holt's eyes do not move, but the vector of her attention shifts enough to acknowledge that Kest exists. General, she says, your perimeter collapses in 2 hours under current strain. Your Munitorum reserves are low. Then you understand the problem. Kest turns back to Robin. Can you break the chancellors? They're threading coordination through their filth. We kill one knot and another tightens. Robin considers the word priest he neutralized, the binary underlay in the cant, the symbol on the pillar with the cog. He sees Felmath wrapped around industry like a parasite. They've co-opted a machine altar, he says, something that carries power through the manufactorum, not just pipes and wires, identity. If we find the anchor point, we can cut the whole him off the grid. Mechanicus assets, Holt says, unavailable, compromised, or untrustworthy. Then we go under, Cyborg says, eyes narrowing as he pulls up fresh scans. I'm seeing a harmonic spike near something called the Kiln of St. Pyre. Big blackstone signature mixed with, what did you call it? Raven. Unhappiness, she says simply. Shaped. They've built a crown to pin the warp to the factory's mind. Holt's lips thin. Noctilith crown analog, she says. It's almost a mutter. Ambitious for cult scum. Starfire flexes her hand and the light rolls, then stills. We must take it apart piece by piece, she says softly. And we must keep the people from the knives they sharpen for themselves. Holt studies Starfire's face, human for a second in curiosity. You are not human, she says, which is not accusation but inventory. I am Coriander, Starfire answers, without apology. And I have learned what people are. Kest draws a breath that sounds like rust. Planet, she says to Robin. 5 minutes, then you move. He pivots in place, points as he speaks. Marshal Krell, your Arbites hold the choke points, no pursuit, shield and detain. General Kest, pull 2 squads of the steadiest you have to shadow us, not fight. That's us. Inquisitor Holt, if you have nulls. Her smile is a blade without joy. I do not spend blanks on guesses. Then keep them to protect this square, he says. Because if we do this wrong, the hymn turns, and everything sings back at us. He looks at Raven. You lead us to the pain. She nods once. The word costs her. She pays. They drop into the manufactorum sublevels like divers into a warm, poisonous ocean. Lights flicker and chant lines snake along the walls in oil and nail blood. The air has a taste of old coins and new sin. Raven walks like a dowser of grief, eyes half-lidded, fingers slightly spread. They pass through a gallery of idle servitors kneeling in perfect rows, heads craned toward a brass grill. They murmur a prayer not in their programming. Cyborg winces as the waveform scrapes his implants. He touches one servitor's shoulder and speaks a counter-frequency under his breath. The servitor doesn't wake. He stops staring. Beast Boy pads ahead as a rat, then a bat, then a lanky dog that could be a wolf's poorer cousin. He marks tripwires and sniffs out fungus patches that are not fungus, but thin scabs over holes. He pees on one. It hisses and dies. Starfire moves in the middle. A cool torch. The light that leaks from her is sweet, not sticky, and the pipes it touches stop sweating. Robin measures distances, angles, fallback routes. His mind lays this place out like a chessboard with multiple queens and one king that isn't on the board at all. The silent calculus stabilizes him. It is a thing that yields to attention. At the kiln of St. Pyre, the ceiling opens into a black stone crown, nailed into the air by scaffolds, a geometry of angles that hate eyes. Tech shrines are wired into it by cables that look like rosaries made of teeth. A word-bearer stands on a strut above, armor engraved in script, helm a sneer. He is not the main sermon, not the dark apostle. He is a deacon with a heavy bolter and a hymn in his throat. He sees them and laughs. Pilgrims, he says over the loud hailers, voice plush with sacrilege. Come kiss the crown. Cyborg fires first, not to kill. He cuts the loud hailer with a needle beam. The word-bearer's head rocks, not from damage but surprise at the denial. Raven's hands rise. Not yet, Robin says, and she lowers them an inch. He points to 2 anchor points on the crown where the dark sheen thickens. Those. Starfire launches in a straight line, no flourish, a spear of heat. She punches a brace apart and the crown tilts. The room groans. The hymn shivers. The word-bearer pivots the heavy bolter toward the squads, shadowing in the rear. Robin is already moving. He throws a line and swings up, feet kissing strut, body a calculation. He lands on the barrel, plants a boot, and shoves the angle a hair. The ensuing burst goes wide and chews a hole in a statue of St. Pyre who endures. Heretic, the word-bearer chuckles, and his free hand swings a chain axe with the patient joy of a butcher. Robin drops under the swing and hooks the chain with a baton twist. The axe snarls, bites its own haft, sticks. The Marine's laugh becomes a growl. Beast Boy becomes something out of no book, a crocodile-wolf hybrid that should not fit on a catwalk, but does when rage squeezes geometry. He clamps onto the Marine's knee joint, not teeth on armor, but jaws on the place where plates betray. The word-bearer kicks, shakes him loose, and grinds a boot where Beast Boy's ribs would be if he were human just then. He is again, and coughs scarlet once, then becomes a rhino and slams the strut. The crown tilts more. Cyborg is a wall in the doorway for the squads, absorbing ricochets and feeding data through a whisper burst to the PDF sergeants. No one heroic, he says, very calm. No one dies alone. Raven reaches for the second anchor and feels the crown reach back. It wants to be worn. It whispers about the uses of sorrow. She remembers the time when she was a room full of knives and shakes her head and pays another coin. A strand of hair blanches. She pinches the bind and it squeals and fails. The hymn dies with it. The echo lingers and bleeds. The word-bearer snarls, rips free of Beast Boy, and slams a gauntlet down on a control plunger. An emergency brace drops, jam-welded. The crown's remaining anchors flare, overcharged. The air goes wrong. A hole tries to be born. Back, Robin shouts and points. Everyone back. Starfire throws herself against the third brace and burns it. But the hole takes her light and makes it red for a second. It looks at her and at Raven and licks its lips with gravity. Raven steps forward. I am so tired of mouths, she says almost to herself, and opens her hands again. The soul self rolls out and around the nascent hole, not fighting directly, but changing the shape of the room's pain. The hole loses interest. The obsession that invited it crumbles. It gutters and dies. Holt's voice barks in his ear as if she were beside him. Report. Anchor severed, Robin says, breathing hard. Crown destabilized, hole gone. One Astartes on site, not dead, not happy. Kest, Holt says on another channel. Your perimeter just breathed easier for 10 seconds. That was them. Kest's reply is a sigh with a frame. Understood. Hold that line. Everyone else, use the breath. The word-bearer pulls a lever that shouldn't exist, and the floor under Robin hisses out of being. He drops into a maintenance shaft like a letter into a slot. He snatches a rung with his fingers, skin tearing, shoulders jolting. The rung creaks and bends, but holds. The Marine leans over the hole, heavy bolter aimed like a priest's finger. A bolt round is a miniature rocket married to a grenade, and it murders ladders. Robin rolls into the shaft's shadow as the rung explodes and fragments knife the air. The next round hits the rung below his boots, and he drops 3 meters and catches another. Pain makes his breath jerk. Irritated, he thinks. Sloppy to be in a hole under a heavy weapon. Raven blurs and is there, a ribbon of night bridging the shaft mouth. Her hand spears down, 2 fingers a hook. He catches them. She pulls without strain. He comes up like a fish and lies breathing, dirt in his teeth. She doesn't smile. Neither does he. They don't need to. The word-bearer steps back, as if reconsidering a sermon to a crowd that suddenly learned a new word. He keys something at his chest, a recall, a promise, a threat. Then he drops backward into the smoke and is gone along a catwalk that shouldn't be there. "Let him go," Robin says when Beast Boy snorts and paws the edge. "He leads to someone we can't kill yet." "Yet?" Beast Boy says, half grin. "Yet," Robin says, and the word isn't bravado. It's a scheduling note. They tear the crown down to innocuous pieces. Each piece fights. Each piece loses. Cyborg marks them with a bright paint that is a warm counter to the cold they were. He files waveforms and grows quiet somewhere inside as he maps what hurt him. They emerge into the cathedral square with ash in their hair and the smell of burned scripture on their clothes. The air feels cleaner for 10 seconds, as Holt said it would. Then the next pressure wave hits, distant and heavy, not cult rabble, not a single Astartes. Vox feed hisses and spikes. "Contact orbit," a Navy voice says from a coal ship in the upper atmosphere. Translation signature, small, sharp, looks like a raiding claw. Wordbearer's warband, plus anomalous engine with null bleed, advising caution. Holt's head tilts as if someone kissed her ear with a razor. "Null," she says. Blanks inbound. Kest's jaw hardens. Then the next hymn will be very quiet. Starfire looks at the sky where something like absence writes itself around a darker core. They mask themselves in nothing, she says, and suppresses a shiver not from fear, but from recognition. She has met vacuums that were kinder. Raven feels the lattice at her back tug again, hungry. "The path home is still open," she says, tone neutral. No one asks if that is good news. "We hold here," Kess says, and her voice is iron knocked into a nail. "Your team buys us minutes. We will spend them on lives." Holt's gaze pins Raven. "Which?" she says. "This world is not yours. You choose to be here. You will choose wisely, or I will choose for you." Raven nods slow. "If you kill me for helping, your priest will give a name to the hole that follows," she says quietly. "Do not do that to your city." Holt's mouth twitches. It could be respect or a cataloguing of threat. We'll see. Around them the triage lights flicker, then steady. A child turns in a cot and looks at Beast Boy. He becomes a puppy and lets her touch his ears. She laughs once, thin as paper. It is not nothing. Cyborg patches into the Navy feed with permission and partial passwords, guessed from hearing one officer speak twice. He pulls down a vector map and prints it onto the plaza in a hard light. 3 red claw icons dropping toward the southern sally. One dark oval with a blue ring that makes the air feel itchy even in wireframe. "Smarter foe arrives," Robin says. "We plan for pain." He looks at Raven. She nods. He looks at Holt. She does not nod. He looks at Kest. She has no time for nodding and moves. The breath they bought collapses into motion. The sky darkens where it was already dark. Somewhere, a bell rings that no one heard ring before. The city inhaled. Now it must exhale iron. They pace themselves to the next moment. The story is not done with them, nor they with it. They cut the crown and bore to breath. Now the sky writes knives. The first claw comes in on contrails that look like subtraction. 3 Stormburst shadows slide over Helsreach's southern sally and disgorge red-armored giants into heat shimmer and ash. Word-bearers land like statues dropped from a height, their scripture-etched plates sparking when they hit. They plant banners whose cloth is skin and whose poles hum with binary rot. The banners begin to sing. Robin is already moving. "Kill the songs, not the singers," he says, and pivots the whole field with one sentence. Cyborg slams a spike into the cathedral's archaic grid and drags a map out of rust. Alleys, smelter flows, pressure lines, the bones of a city that survived too many wars. He tags 3 valves in his overlay. "Close, vent, overpressure," he murmurs, and the Manufactorum answers like a tired animal that still remembers teeth. Starfire leaps, not toward the Astartes, but toward a smokestack valve bigger than a chapel door. Her hands bury themselves in iron, and heat blooms white around her. The stack chokes, coughs, reverses. A pressure wave rolls low along the ground like fog and knocks the word-bearers' banners into their own voices. The hymn chokes for a count of 4. Beast Boy splashes into the vent maze as an octopus, thin and impossible where no water lives. He squeezes through a gap a child couldn't crawl and pops out into a shrine closet under one banner's base. He becomes a gorilla with a wrench the size of a man's hope and simply twists. The banner's base fractures. The song warbles, off-key and stupid. Raven does not move at first. She feels the hymn's hooks seeking nerves, looking for grief to pluck. She is full of grief and does not give a string. Her soul self rolls out as a gauze, not a fist. She drapes it over the crowd nearest the Sally, and the hymn hits her veil and slides off like a knife against glass. The word-bearers recalibrate with the cold joy of true believers. Heavy bolters spit and explode in patterns that assume the defenders will stand up and die. Robin uses those assumptions. He cracks smoke in 3 places at once, throws 2 lines that cross in the air, and turns a killing lane into a curtain. Shots hammer a statue. The saint absorbs and doesn't forgive. Marshal Krell's Arbeits interlock shields and move like a hinge, not an army. They don't chase. They cut the field into squares and let the titans run through their lattice. A sergeant tries to be brave and stand. Cyborg's calm voice drops in through the man's helmet and gives him a safer thing to do. Left 4 steps, down. Breathe. I've got your sight line. The sergeant obeys and lives, and will later think of that voice when he holds a child. Starfire takes a bolt around to the shoulder at a bad angle and staggers. She rides the pain as if it were wind. Her beam isn't a beam. It's a wide wash that melts none of the sacred brass, only the letters carved into heretics' plates. She erases their words first. Their bodies remember pain. Their faith flinches. Beast Boy becomes a swarm of rats and eats the fuses on a banner base. He becomes a man again and spits hair and laughs once without humor at himself. Gross, he mutters, and becomes a bore to shove a barricade where the Arbeits want it. Raven threads under a burst that would have unmade anyone else's bones and puts 2 fingers to a word-bearer's helm cheek. Where the scripture crosses, she does not blast. She pricks a bubble of hate and the Marine reels as if drunk, roaring, blind for a heartbeat. Kest's line does not waste it. They shoot his hands, not his chest, and the heavy weapon clatters down 2 flights of stairs into a puddle of slag and becomes a bad idea. Robin reaches the 3rd banner and chooses not to cut it. A cut would leave a bleeding wound. He throws a rope, swings, and wraps the banner in his line, then yanks its pole into a whirring ventilator. The cloth tears on sanctified fins and flutters into the vent like surrender. The song collapses. The word-bearers do not. They charge with chain blades held low, teeth hot, moving as if they own the ground. A Black Templar's probe at the southern edge sees red on red and moves to engage on instinct. Zeal stroking zeal. Robin whistles once, sharp, a dog command at men in holy plate. Not them, Kess barks into her vox at the same time. The rare double reinforcement catching the Templar's pilot in that thin place where obedience and pride wrestle. The pilot hangs back a hair. It is enough to avoid a friendly slaughter. Guess it's 'tis. The word bearers strike a line of Arbite shields at a run and expect to go through like a train. They hit shield, then step gap, then shield again, the line flexing like a rib cage around a heart. Beast Boy becomes a bull and hits a knee. Starfire cuts a chain blade belt, not a wrist. Cyborg backhands a grenade, mid-arc, and wraps it in a hard light sleeve. It detonates inside its own silence. Raven watches the places where the warp thinks it is clever. She squeezes them with elegant contempt. The daemon that was going to step through a bolt's crater and become a mouth finds that the crater is shaped wrong and cannot pronounce itself. It sulks. She bleeds a thread from one eye and does not wipe it because her hands are busy. They turn the push. The word bearers fall back in a cohesion that is almost beautiful. Doctrine applied to retreat without fear. One Marine shoulders a wounded brother and shoves him into a Stormbird hold as the ram grinds shut. He doesn't reach back for a hand that reaches. He knows the math. He leaves. Robin doesn't chase them up the ramp. With a grapple he could land. He clamps his fists at his sides and holds. The Stormbird lifts, finds an air pattern and goes, taking scripture and a wounded choir with it. Kest's perimeter breathes again. The triage lanterns flicker, then hold. The Navy Vox hums with the thin pleasure of not dying right now. Codex note. Word-bearer field banners broadcast layered cant and scrap code. Disrupting anchors and counterventing manufactorum pressure breaks coherence with minimal structural loss. Smoke lowers, and then the shouting swells again, but this time with names. Loved ones found, squad mates counted. Holt walks through it like weather. Her boots leave no ash on the steps. She stops in front of Robin and looks at him without the desire to win, only the desire to evaluate. You chose not to pursue, she says. Why? We're not built for their ramp, he says. And the null we haven't seen yet is not on that ship. It's the dark oval. He nods at the hard light map still faint on the stones. If we chase and the oval lands behind us, we get pinched. Then Raven bleeds out into a hat. Holt's mouth does an ambiguous thing. You learn. Or we bury children, he says. And that is not for her. It is a note to memory. They make war council in the cathedral's nave because the sacristy is full of wounded and the chapter house is rubble. The nave is high and loud, with carved martyrs whose lives look like sermons. Kest stands at a makeshift hololith, a table with a projector grafted from two broken housings and a shrine lamp. Marshal Krell leans on her maul as if it were a pillar. Holt stands without leaning. A Black Templar sword brother called Alaric watches from the side, with a hand on the hilt of a weapon he isn't being asked to sheathe. Robin lays out the next 30 minutes like a road. We keep civilians inside this perimeter and keep their eyes off the sky. We don't let the hymn find purchase. We see decoys along the rail spines, so the next drop hits a kill pocket with no people in it. We anchor Raven with a lattice that costs less. Holt's gaze slides to Raven. Costs less, she repeats, as if measuring the words for truth. Raven meets the look. The path we opened is still open, she says. I am holding it. If I let go, we might not get home. If I hold it too hard, I cut myself into it. If I release it on purpose at the right moment, I can turn the opening into a seam and not a mouth. And if you misjudge, Holt says, then you shoot me Raven answers, level. Starfire's fists clench. Heat tongues her knuckles. No, she says, and the word is a vow. Holt tilts her head. Mercy is sweet, I know, she says, almost kindly. But sometimes mercy unclenches the fist that must strike. Kess bites off the argument with a look. We do not shoot helpers while they help, she says. We make a plan. The plan eats 5 minutes and 3 temperaments. It tastes like compromise. Kest wants minefield doctrine, curfew, and auto-mortars on every approach. The Manufactorum's bones cannot take it. Robin shows her how 2 mortars here collapse a support there and bury 100 who have nowhere else to go. Holt wants the tainted workshops sanctified by fire. Cyborg points out that the city runs on the power those workshops channel. Burn them, and the Medici lose light and the pumps die. Holt does not apologize. She adjusts. Starfire wants to pull every wounded child into the nave and stand over them like a different kind of statue. Kest points at the map and shows how concentration draws fire. Starfire nods once and places her light along the perimeter instead. A string of beads that are also stars. Marshal Krell says nothing until the end. Then she says, we can hold this square and the 3 streets under its eye. Anything beyond will be lawless. If your mercy needs ground, get me ground. Mercy needs time, Robin says. We'll buy it with ground. Holt's eyes close for 1 second. It is prayer or triage or both. When she opens them, they are colder and kinder. You will not proselytize, she says to Starfire. You will not preach a new god. I will only shine, Starfire says, and the nave warms by a degree. Holt turns to Raven. When the null lands, you will not try to wrestle a hole. You will anchor, shield, and deny passage only. You will not reach. I will not reach, Raven says quietly, and hates the need to promise. Not because she will break it, because the promise binds a piece she might need later. Kest looks at Robin. Your boy is bleeding. Robin glances down and sees that his glove is sticky. He hadn't noticed the tear in his forearm, a long slice where the ladder rung bit him. He doesn't have time to feel it. He nods to his sister and offers the arm without pride. She cleans it with something that bites, stitches him with 4 tidy knots, and pats the back of his hand as if he were a child and a comrade both. The Navy voice returns, flattened by distance. Dark oval separating. It is not a ship. Gravity wrong. Looks like a null drive with meat around it. Escorts, 3 corvettes with spikes. Unmarked, likely heretic. Altitude decreasing. Projection. Southern Sally in 2 minutes. Holt speaks without looking away from Raven. Calexis or a cousin, she says. Blanks with engines. They make witches into ash of the soul. Starfire steps closer to Raven without thinking. Raven smiles a little, tired and grateful. Robin gathers them with his eyes and words. We make our first victory stick, he says. Control the collateral. If the null bites, I want human solutions on the board. No one overextends. We hold the square. We keep the path. Beast Boy grins lopsided. Dogpile the void, he says. And his courage is a joke, he tells himself and makes true by saying it. They break. The null engine comes down in a drift. Not a dive, as if the world were water and it a spider. It hangs above the Sally on anti-gravs that whine in a register that makes stomachs clench. The meat around it is robed and shackled, a choir of human shapes with faces like closed doors. Their mouths are sewn with wire and their eyes are absent. In their place are pits that drink light. The air freezes in a circle around them. Sound dies. Cyborg's readings don't go to 0. They go to whatever is under 0. His HUD glitches, then blanks, then falls back to analog. He swears, softly, the word stripped of anger by fear. Raven feels it before it touches her. It is not a push. It is subtraction. The parts of her that are edges go dull. Her soul self flickers like a film in a projector that misses frames. She breathes and anchors. She does not reach. Starfire's flames gutter. They do not die. They turn from color to heat. She shifts tactics mid-step, stops throwing light, and becomes a furnace with no smoke, a presence that makes the coal less total. Beast Boy's shapes stutter at their edges. He becomes a bear, and then he is a boy inside a bear suit, and then he is just a boy with his fists up because the field makes meaning shallow. He bares his teeth and keeps them bared by choice. Robin is fine. The null can't take from him what he doesn't use to move. His discipline is a human thing, badly optimized and perfect here. He sees the choir and the engine and the spike array and the control whips that the handlers, word-bearer, serfs in velvet and chains, used to cue the beasts. He marks the whips as the weak link and changes the fight. Cut the whips, he says, and the whole team adjusts to obey something that doesn't rely on soul or sun. Cyborg flips to hard ammo. His arm blooms a coil gun, dumb and honest. He sends a steel slug on a straight line and takes a handler's wrist off at the bracelet. The whip falls. The choir stutters. Starfire shoulder checks a corvette skimming too low and dents a wing without light. She hits it like a meteor that forgot to burn, a pure impact. The pilot overcorrects and clips a shrine. The shrine topples exactly into the gap the Arbites left for it to fall into, and it becomes a barricade and a sermon. Beast Boy takes a handler at the waist as a hyena, not to kill, but to shake. Teeth crunch chain, not spine. The whip arcs and drops. The choir stutters again. A tone disappears and the cold gets thinner. Raven stands and endures in a way that is a fight. She shapes her anchor like a cup and holds the square inside it. The null licks at the rim and cannot find purchase. She bleeds from both nostrils now. She does not wipe it. She thinks of her mother and of a room where everything was knives, and of a girl who learned to knit the knives into a wall. She does that again now. Holt steps onto the steps with a bolt pistol and aims at a handler's mouth because the mouth is where the orders come out even when it is sewn shut. She shoots. The handler falls. Holt doesn't smile, not even a little. Kest's squads move in a choreography that looks like stubborn water. They don't fire at the choir. They fire at the rigs that hold the choir's feet in their cradles. One rig fails. A blank tumbles. The field's shape wobbles. Raven breathes again without having to count. Robin flicks a baton at a whip's cable and wraps it once, twice, yanks. The whip goes taut. Handler and boy both jerk, and the cable snaps at the crook where old metal meets newer sin. The choir hisses. The engine dips. One of the blanks turns its face toward Raven. The absence there is not malice. It is the opposite of interest. A gap wants to be bigger because that is what gaps do. Raven looks at it the way one might look at the ocean when one is tired of drowning. She thinks of a seam, not a door, and pinches again. She cannot pinch the field. She can pinch the invitation. The field hums around her cup and loses one finger's worth of hold. The corvettes rake the square with stubber fire because that is what you do when you don't know what your god wants yet. Starfire chooses to be a wall, not a spear, and stands in front of a line of cots with her back to the shooters. Rounds hit her and tick away into the stones. A sister of battle, pale habit, ash-wrapped, puts a hand on Starfire's shoulder and prays without words. The prayer doesn't fuel anything. It steadies something. Beast Boy is a snake around the handler's thigh. He squeezes, and the man drops the whip and a blade. The blank above him twitches as if bored, and the field falters for a heartbeat as the chain of intention breaks. Cyborg sees it. They're chaining their nothing, he says, voice flat through grit. Break the chain and the nothing is less. Language, Raven whispers, and something like a laugh cracks in her throat and makes her hurt in a healthier way. Robin climbs a fallen saint and jumps for a whip post and misses. He doesn't fall. He catches a prayer flag and swings, hits a post with both boots, and knocks it into the Corvette's intake. The intake chews the post and chokes. The Corvette coughs and veers, and the pilot saves it at the cost of altitude. Kest's mortars, which she had not wanted but kept, cough once. The shell bursts above the Corvette and sprinkles shrapnel like confetti at a funeral. The pilot makes a choice and leaves. They strip the Blank's handlers of their control. The choir stays, but the engine loses its rests. A note that should be pure gets ragged. The field thins around Raven's cup. She inhales and finds strength enough in ordinary air to be steady again. The word bearers on the ground see the chain break and choose their god's favorite virtue. Spite. They shoot children. They shoot wounded. They shoot sisters. They do not aim at the Titans because the Titans are not the point of their sermon today. Their point is despair. Marshal Krell steps into a lane and lifts her shield and takes 3 rounds that would have ended a medic's year. She does not fall. She moves forward. Around her, Arbites stop being a line and become an argument with the world. The word bearers step back. Robin finds the engine's docking clamps with his eyes and then with 2 beacons that he slaps onto quick and mean. He whistles twice. Cyborg hears it and tunes. He seizes the beacons with a mag throw and yanks the engine 3 meters sideways. It bumps a tower and warbles like a bell that doesn't want to ring. Raven's anchor holds. She does not reach. She does the hardest thing she knows. She does less. Holt shoots another handler in the mouth, and then another, and her face is calm as weather, and nothing like mercy and nothing like joy. Starfire breathes, and keeps a river of bullets from killing 3 children, and a man who will fix 5 water pumps tomorrow if he lives. She is tired, and her tired smells like caramel and iron. Beast Boy becomes a big cat, and leaps and drags a word-bearer serf off a platform, and then becomes a man before they hit the ground and rolls, so he lands under, and the air leaves his body, and he lies there for a second counting stars he cannot see because it is day. The engine falters. The choir's feet shift. 1 blank slips a binding, and for 1 instant stands free. It looks around with eyes it doesn't have, and seems to decide that there is too much world. It falls forward and hits the stones, and the field around it buckles like a drumhead punched. Raven feels a path open the width of a needle and threads the square sphere through it and away, not to the warp, but to a seam she made that goes nowhere. The fear leaves without being fed. It feels like pouring water into sand, and it is glorious. Robin severs the last whip with a throwing blade so thin it looks like a mistake. The cable snaps, the choir goes slack, the engine droops and then jerks as a failsafe bites. A word-bearer in a horned helm keys a recall. The engine groans and rises, drones fighting gravity and morality. It goes, dragging its choir like bells. No pursuit, no reach. They hold. Kest checks her dead and her munitions with the same hands, one after the other. Holt holsters her pistol and looks at Raven. They share a second where no one else exists in their eyes. "Thank you," Holt says. "You obeyed." "I didn't save them all," Raven says, and the self-indictment is a dry knife. "No one does," Holt says, and for once there is no edge in her voice, only the permission to be a person. They count costs. Cyborg's implants hum wrong. He can fix them with time and wire and silence he will not get. He adds the failure to a list and writes a patch in his mind with a pencil dull on one side. Beast Boy's ribs are a puzzle that doesn't click. Nothing is broken. Everything hurts. He jokes and means it less. Starfire's shoulder smokes and will scar. She will trace the scar later and think of the man with the water pumps. Robin's stitches hold. His glove sticks when he flexes his hand. He doesn't wipe the blood off on his cape because that would be theatrical. He wipes it on his pants and moves on. Raven's hair has more white than it did an hour ago. Thin threads like frost on dark water. She could hide it with a thought. She doesn't. She stands in the nave and lets her sister press a cloth to her nose. The sister's hand shakes. Raven holds it still with two fingers that are colder than they look. They debrief, because the next blow is always at the edge of the last sentence. Kest points at the map. We can keep the southern Sally. We cannot keep the eastern rail. We abandon it now and save 2 squads. We hold it and lose those squads and the rail anyway. Abandon, Robin says. Tell them why. Promise them we'll reopen it. Keep your word later. Words, Holt says, as if tasting them. Words hold people in place long enough to live, Robin says. Yours do. Mine can. Holt acknowledges the line with a flicker that might be respect. The warband will adjust, she says. They will bring doctrine shaped like your weaknesses. They already did, Raven says softly. Holt nods. They will bring more. Marshal Krell asks the question she has been chewing since the first moment. If mercy keeps them and doctrine keeps them, what do we do when mercy and doctrine bite? Robin doesn't answer first. Starfire does. We choose the thing that saves the most living, and then we ask forgiveness, she says. From whom depends on your story. But we ask. Holt's mouth tilts. The Emperor does not bargain. Then he is alone, Starfire says, not unkindly. The Templar bristles a degree. Kest's hand quirks and the bristle settles. Raven's gaze drops to the stones. I have asked forgiveness from a thing that never gave it, she says. I learned to forgive myself instead. It is dangerous. It is necessary. Holt studies her as if Raven just said a heresy that healed a wound. And if self-forgiveness leads to indulgence, then you are here, Raven says, and the line lands between them like a shared oath. The cathedral doors boom once. A distant strike transmitted through stone. The Navy voice bleeds down from a brass speaker like a cold fog. New contact. Signature masked. Looks like Mechanicus, but not friendly. Null bleed smaller. Sharper. Mimetic layer detected in Vox noise. Repeat, mimetic. Advise filters. Cyborg stiffens. Mimetic hex, he says. They'll sing malware into your ears. Holt's jaw hardens. You will not listen to unknown sermons, she says into the command net. If you hear your mother's voice commanding piety, shoot the speaker. Kest doesn't flinch at that. She has made worse calls and will again. Robin looks at Raven and then at Cyborg. We strip our advantage to test our backups, he says. Raven anchors only. Vic, you kill every luxury in your suite and run cold iron. We fight with hands and habits. Cyborg nods. He reaches into himself with the surgeon's cruelty and turns off every nice thing. His world goes dull. He breathes anyway. They move to meet the smarter foe before it rights itself in their square. The prow that slides around a Habspire like a fish is a small Mechanicus skiff, filigreed with heresy. Its hull is blackstone shingles over a core of wrong math. Its prow lens gleams with a light that is not light. Around it, on skates of air, drift 6 figures in skin-tight suits whose helms are skulls that never were human. Calexus cousins or a craft world's unlucky enemies made into tools, pariahs harvested like rare ore and put into armor that feeds on the warp and on pity. They don't speak. The skiff speaks for them, but it doesn't use words at first. It uses a tone that feels like remembering doing harm and liking it. People jerk. 2 men start crying and don't know why. Holt's voice slices across the square. Filters, she says. Now. Cyborg pops a cover and yanks a wire ragged from an audio grid. The tone stutters. He smiles without humor. "Try me," he mutters. And the skiff tries. It modulates. He modulates back. The air between them becomes a chessboard for hearts. Pariahs step forward, and the world dips. Where they tread, murals flake. Candles go out. Raven's cup warps, then holds. She hears nothing from them because there is nothing to hear. That is the horror. Starfire learns a new way to stand. She stops being heat. She becomes weight. She is a stone in a river. The water must move around her. It is not as grand as fire. It is better for this. Beast Boy becomes a tortoise and takes a blast of nothing, squarely on a shell. It should leave a mark. It leaves a feeling that he will never be loved. He shakes, he pushes up, he becomes a man and laughs one real laugh that keeps him together. Too late, he tells the feeling. I already am. Robin runs at a pariah because someone has to. He doesn't jump, he doesn't flip. He runs and slides and takes its legs because legs are legs even when the soul is a whole. He smashes a joint hard with a baton and wins the smallest of victories, a pariah on a knee. Cyborg shoots the skiff's lens, and the slug pings off into a prayer niche and chips a cherub. He adjusts 2 degrees and shoots again, and this time the slug goes through a heat shimmer and hits a coil that is vulnerable because someone hastened the build. The skiff hiccups, its tone wobbles, the pariahs falter. Holt's bolt pistol barks once, and a handler behind the skiff loses half a head. It isn't the right target. It is not the wrong one either. The skiff decides to speak in words because tones aren't bending this square enough. It says a sentence that is several sentences at once, none of which are true, but all of which sound like they could be. Kest's leftmost squad jerks as if shocked. Their eyes glass for a second. Marshal Krell slams her maul against her shield, and the sound is a fact. The squad steadies. Power scaling interlude. Mive 1. Calixus-class pariahs project an anti-psyker field that collapses warp interactions within a radius. Raven's soul self decays at the edges in contact, forcing her to anchor rather than act. Noctilith plating on the skiff resonates with Starfire's emissions, inverting and bleeding heat without light, so she must switch from radiance to mass and impulse. The skiff's Vox layer injects mimetic patterns that hijack attention and decision loops in baseline humans. Discipline drills and external shocks disrupt it, but not perfectly. Cyborg's augmetics are vulnerable to scrap code encoded as chant. Running cold iron and isolating subsystems narrows attack surface but limits support. Beast Boy's morphic field, a psychosomatic interface, jitters under null exposure, reducing form stability and forcing shorter, more grounded transformations. Raven holds her promise and finds a way to help inside it. She steps 3 paces that somehow change the square's geometry, and the pariah's field catches on her cup's rim and squeals like a saw, hitting a nail. It doesn't stop. It tilts a degree. That degree saves a life somewhere she can't see. Starfire steps into a pariah space and pushes. Not hits, pushes. It is like shouldering a hole. It moves. It hates that. It has to balance. It is suddenly a thing with mass rather than a principle. And in that change, it is weaker. Robin faints high, goes low, and cuffs a pariah's ankle with a line. He yanks. It drops. He is on it in a breath and ties its limbs in a pattern he learned for restraining metahumans who think they are above ropes. It shouldn't work. It almost doesn't. It holds anyway, because the field is busy fighting Raven's Cup and cannot be everywhere. Cyborg hammers the skiff until something inside it screams in arithmetic. The tone dies. The mimetic layer drops. Words are words again, not hooks. Holt holsters her pistol and draws a blade that was old before her grandmother was born. She steps into the pariah's dead zone and doesn't flinch when her faith goes quiet. She stabs where a human's kidney would be. The suit sparks, the pariah spasms. It reaches for her face like a child that wants to know if skin can break. She leans away exactly as far as she must and no more. Beast Boy becomes an elephant and puts his forehead to the skiff's nose and pushes. The skiff, robbed of tone and missing a coil, moves. He trumpets once and the sound is ridiculous and beautiful and human. The pariahs hate it and step back. The skiff calculates that this square costs more than the sermon it could win and backs away, graceful even in retreat. The pariahs drift with it, helms pivoting. One looks at Raven 1 second longer than the others. She looks back without hate, not forgiveness, just recognition. It leaves. The smarter foe didn't break them. It taught them something expensive. They keep it. Kest inventories again. Faster this time. She is learning their pace. Holt stares at the place where the skiff was, and then at Raven's hair, and then at Robin's hands, and then at Starfire's burned shoulder, and then at Beast Boy's grin. She nods once. A movement so small you could mistake it for breathing. You adapt, she says. We have to, Robin says. Holt looks toward the south where the word-bearer's stormbird dots are commas on the horizon. They will escalate, she says. They will bring a name. Raven nods. They will bring a priest who is a knife, she says. And a knife that is a book. Starfire flexes her fingers, and the light comes back in them like dawn through old glass. We will be ready to learn again, she says. And there is joy in it, which hurts. Marshal Krell thumps her maul once on the stone, and the sound is the same fact as before. We go back to holding, she says, and we wait for the next bad idea to land. Robin breathes and binds a cut on his arm tighter. He looks at the hard light map and draws 3 new lines with a finger that leaves light where it passes. He sets traps that are not traps so much as options that favor the living. He sets one that will save Holt's life in an hour, and another that will give a child a path to a door that isn't blocked. Raven sits on a step, because sitting is not weakness when standing wastes a coin. A sister sits next to her and doesn't speak. They share a silence that is not empty. Cyborg reconnects 1 system and not 2, writes 3 patches with a mental grease pencil, and thinks about a hanging problem. A whisper he heard in a packet that didn't belong. He doesn't mention it yet because he hasn't confirmed. He files it. He will pay for that later. Beast Boy lies on his back on the cathedral stones and looks up at the saints and thinks that some of them look like people he knows. He decides which one is Raven and which one is Corey and which is Vic and which is Dick. And he doesn't tell them because it would make them laugh, and he wants to hold the thought a minute. Starfire walks the perimeter and puts her hand on each guard's shoulder one by one and says something small to each that matches their face. She doesn't speak a sermon, she speaks a memory. The square settles into a war's version of calm. The city around it groans. The sky keeps being too low. The Navy Vox clears its throat with a scatter of interference that tastes like rain. Long-range augers read a new mass signature, the voice says. Capital letter A on our threat board. Named Asset Inbound. Not a warband. A leader. Holt's head tilts again. That tiny motion she does when fate knocks. Dark Apostle, she says. Named Antagonist. Robin rolls his shoulders. He feels tired in places that don't show. Then we plan for a duel we won't like and a wound we don't understand. Raven closes her eyes and shapes the word seam in her mind until it becomes a place she can go in a step if she must. She will not yet, but she sets it aside like a tool on a bench. Starfire smiles at a child, and the child smiles back without knowing why. The child will live through the night, and that will matter. They bought a victory and paid coins without names. They are not rich. They are not broke. The ledger has ink left, and so does the day. The square breathes in the aftershock, while the next blow gathers weight. Recap. They broke the banners, blunted the null engine, kept their promise not to reach. Now the enemy names itself. In the nave, a table becomes a map under calloused hands. Kest pins 3 markers with spent casings. They're not harrying, she says. They're shaping. They want the Cathedral of Titan's Mercy as anchor, the Manufactorum as choir, the Saint's legend as fuel. Holt listens without blinking. A sermon written iron, she says. Standard counters fail because fire costs civilians. Psychers fail because pariahs fold the field. Mechanicus assets fail because the cult twisted their liturgies first. Cyborg adds a layer. Vents, pressure differentials, Blackstone signatures. They've got a Blackstone node under the processional of iron, he says. Big one. If they sanctify it in their way, your city starts singing back to them whenever you light a foundry. Alaric, the Templar, wants to charge because that is virtue in his book. He says it boldly, without contempt. Cut off the head, he says. Spare the sheep. Robin doesn't disagree, he refines. We cut off the head by taking its staff first, he says. Apostles carry a locus, relic, Crozius, book. Without it, the doctrine doesn't project as well. We hit the processional. We keep civilians behind stone. We thread the pariah ring. Raven's voice is quiet enough to be a breath. He will try to speak to me, she says. Not to my ears. To the room inside my name. I will not answer. Holt studies her face, then looks at Starfire. You will not light the roof on fire, she says without malice. I will not, Starfire answers. I will be a weight against their void. Marshal Krell grunts. My shields go front, she says. If your boy needs a lane, he calls. Kest finds the pinch points and assigns squads with the speed of someone who has played this game too often. 2 fire teams on the processional's flanks to haul civilians clear, she says. Mortars hold silence unless I say, sing. They move before the map cools. The processional of iron, with chains of devotional tags. Candles stand like an army along the walls, unspent and waiting. At the far end, a palanquin rides on shoulders that don't belong to the men carrying it. The litter is hexagrammic blackstone. Its edges reject light. Around it walk word-bearers in red, with scripture like flensed skin. 2 pariahs drift like holes at the corners, chained to the frame by silver cables. Atop the palanquin stands the Dark Apostle. His armor is old and baroque, every inch carved with text that crawls. His helm is a priest's skull with vox-grilled teeth. A Crozius hooks on his hip like a shepherd's tool remade for wolves. In his left hand, he holds a book bound in someone's future. In his right, a blade that looks thin until you see the way light bends around it. His voice fills the processional without amplification. It is not loud, it is sure. Helsreach is a church, he says. You have worshipped the ash too long. I bring you the heat under the ash. Raven feels the words sliding along her edges, looking for locks. She cups her anchor tighter. She does not reply. Robin throws his first line into a chandelier chain and swings, setting 2 beacons on the palanquin's underside as he passes. He lands in a crouch inside a pattern of chalk sigils someone laid at dawn. He wipes 3 without thinking, and the air stops tasting like pennies there. Cut the staff, he whispers into the net. Cyborg cycles to hard iron. He chooses targets with an engineer's cruelty. The palanquin's corner clamps. The pariah's cable anchors. The Crozius's power node. His first shot hits, his second hits, his third skates. As the pariah field hiccups, he adjusts. Starfire walks forward through a field that wants to be less than 0. She refuses. Heat gathers, not a flare but a pressure. The candles nearest her catch without flame, wicks smouldering, smoke white as linen. Beast Boy goes ground level and ugly. Rat under boots, dog between knees, man behind an acolyte's heel to kick a pin from a roller. The palanquin's bearer line staggers. The apostle's head tilts. He sees the pattern of their move and smiles like a teacher whose lesson will hurt. "You fight like you remember love," he says. "Let me make that memory useful." His blade comes up and cuts the air. It doesn't look fast. It is in front of Raven between one breath and the next. Robin is there first. He steps into the line, baton crossing. Cape a fact and not a flourish. The blade kisses the baton and slides. The baton is warded by a dozen nights of work and 50 arguments with a friend who builds weapons and hates them. It holds, but only once. The apostle doesn't press. He turns his helm, and the empty eyes rest on Robin. "Dog of rules," he says. "Leash your witch, and I will spare your city a flavor of suffering." Robin doesn't answer. He notes the angle of the blade, the wrist tension, the book's open page, a sigil shaped like a nail. He shifts his foot half a palm. He keeps the door behind him in his mind and the girl who trusts him at his shoulder. "Don't listen," Beast Boy says into the net, and laughs once because he heard himself and sounded 12. Kest's squads pull an old woman and a baby out of a doorway, drag two men who want to pray now at the wrong altar back by their collars, set shields and wait. Marshal Krell plants her maul and looks like a judgment about to move. Holt takes one step into the processional and stops just outside the pariah bleed. She watches like a lioness who has decided her bite will be used only when necessary. The apostle shifts his stance again. "Child of a half-world," he says, and this time his voice has no echo and isn't aimed at ears. "Daughter with a name made of knots. I can untie you." Raven does not reach. She breathes into the cup until the cup is a bowl that is ashore. "You don't know what I am," she says, and her voice is small and steady and breaks two cultists' attention spans, even though it wasn't meant to. The blade flicks. It should miss. It doesn't. It touches her shadow. The wound is not blood. Her soul self recoils as if a fishbone stuck in its throat. Her shadow frays at the edge nearest the blade, and that fray becomes a line that isn't in the same place each time you look. The lattice holding the path home thrums hard enough to make her teeth hurt. She tastes copper. She loses a second. In that second, a bolt round finds a medic and the medic falls. Robin attacks because talk didn't work and timing is everything. He goes for the crozius with a cable snare, wraps it, yanks. The apostle lets it go as if it were nothing and turns his blade again toward Raven. The crozier skitters, hits a candle stand, and knocks 100 prayers into the gutter. Starfire takes a pariah's shoulder first, weight to weight. It moves just enough. She leans, and the cable strains. Cyborg's coil gun coughs and the cable snaps. The pariah's field blooms uncontrolled for an instant and eats the smoke of 10 candles. Raven's cup bends. She holds it anyway, through simple stubbornness. Beast Boy leaps on the palanquin rim as a tiger and turns midair into a man with both hands full of beacon. He slaps them down. The beacons mate and hum. Cyborg yanks. The palanquin tilts. The apostle plants his boots with a grace that is older than this city. He looks down at Robin. "You want rules," he says. "Here is one. Things break along their names." He flips the blade so the edge runs backward and cuts again. Not at Raven's body and not at her shadow, but at the seam she is holding shut. The cut lands as if a draftsman drew a line through a plan. The seam shivers. The cup slops. Raven stumbles and swallows a scream because if she lets it out, it will have a voice. The duel isn't swords trading places. It's his idea of her against her idea of herself, expressed in small, cruel physics. Robin faints high, goes for the book, gets the corner of a page, and tears a triangle. The membrane screams like leather when it's ripped wrong. The apostle's helm turns a fraction too far and then back. "Good," he says, and the single word lands like praise on a child. It makes Robin's spine want to lengthen and his guard rise at the same time. He recognizes the trap and files the reaction as a tool. "Beat me," the apostle says softly. "Then bury her anyway. The city will thank you until it forgets your name." Holt steps into the edge of the field, and her rosette cracks once with cold. She stops there. She will not take one more step and lose her certainty. "Dark Apostle," she says, speaking rank, not begging. "By the authority vested in me, I sentence you to..." "Grief," he says, and the word isn't a sentence. It's an answer. Starfire's palm finds the pariah's helm. She doesn't burn. She pushes. The suit groans. The void withdraws a centimeter. It is enough for Raven to drag the seam back into round. Cyborg drops a silver cord across the processional like a tripwire for giants. A spaced-out word-bearer trips, crashes into his brother, knocks a chunk of palanquin rail loose. Beast Boy grabs that rail piece with ape hands and jams it into a bracket that shouldn't exist. The palanquin lists. The apostle adjusts like a man on a boat. He cuts again, not at Raven now, but at Robin's left hand. The edge passes an inch away, but the baton in that hand remembers the first kiss from the blade and shatters along a stress line that wasn't there before. The fragments ring like bells. Robin doesn't look at his hand. He shifts stance. He doesn't stop. He hears his father's voice with a different name behind it. "You can't save her from everything." He tests the sentence, finds truth in it, refuses the conclusion. Raven's anchor shakes so hard her teeth ache. The seam wants to be a mouth. The voice that used to live in her bones hums from a very far room. It promises ease if she lets go. Ease and fire and a world of no more careful stepping. She wants it for a blink and hates that want, and loves that she still knows to hate it. "Give in," the apostle says kindly. "Spare the children by sparing yourself these inches." Raven turns her head and looks at the child. The child is the one who petted Beast Boy's ear and laughed. That child's eyes are on her now, 3 steps back, behind an Arbite shield, round and huge and wet with someone else's blood spray. Raven shakes her head once, a millimeter. "No," she says to the world. She pays for the word. The blade kisses her shadow again, and the line that isn't in the same place opens a hair. A draft like cemetery wind blows up her spine. Her hair goes white along one more lock. Starfire sees it and makes a small sound that is almost a sob, and isn't, because she needs her breath. Cyborg hears a scrap of scrap code, trying a door he forgot to lock. He slams it and feels the echo in his jaw. The code whispers about perfect order and switches that could make all the doors stay shut. He doesn't answer. He marks it for later quarantine. Beast Boy's body maps around pain. He swallows bile and becomes a rhinoceros at the wrong angle and still manages to hit a bearer's knee. The line sags. The palanquin drops a finger's width. Marshal Krell's shields come up with metronome precision. "Left 3, she calls, and her line slides as one and leaves a gap where a marine lunges and finds no target but a pillar, and hits it and shatters 1,000 votive tags. Paper falls like grey snow. Holt changes aim. There's no shot that kills the apostle without killing Raven or Robin. Instead, she shoots the book's clasp. It shatters. Pages flutter. For a heartbeat, there is no doctrine to hold his tone. He is still himself. That is enough to make him dangerous and off-balance both. Robin surges. He goes for the wrist instead of the blade, traps it body to body. For a second they share weight. The apostle smells like ink and oil and old smoke. "You're late to your own funeral," Robin says, "because the part of him that lies to bullies is a weapon too." The apostle leans in. "You came to the wrong cathedral," he murmurs. "Your God isn't here." "My God is the next breath," Robin says. He twists. The blade scrapes stone and sparks without light. It still kisses Raven's shadow again. She staggers. The seam pulses. A tiny breach yawns in the wrong place, high under the processional second arch. It isn't a mouth yet. It is a lip. Wind hisses out of it and freezes the candles cold blue. A sister, who had been kneeling beside a soldier, looks up and sees night in daylight. She rises and starts to sing. It isn't a hymn anyone taught her. It's a childhood lullaby about boats and a river. Her voice is cracked and small and true. Other sisters pick it up. Their voices aren't weapons. They are a flaw. The apostle looks up, amused and irritated. "Saccharine," he says. He dips his helm. The pariah field deepens as if in answer. The lullaby doesn't stop. It doesn't cut the field. It gives the people under it somewhere to put their fear. The breech lip steadies. Raven breathes. She plants her feet. "I will not be your knife," she tells the blade and what it implies. She hardens the cup until it is a bowl of basalt. The apostle changes tactics. He steps back on the tilted palanquin and opens the book to a fresh page. He writes. He does not use a quill. The blade tip scratches the hide. The characters curve like snakes eating their tails. He writes a name. It is not her whole name. He cannot have it. It is enough to crack a window. He speaks it. Raven falls to one knee like gravity remembered her. The seam in her anchor splits a nail's breadth. Cold pours through and tries to be a habit. She sees a version of herself with a crown of jagged black and a city burning clean. The vision tastes like rest. "Don't," Starfire breathes, seeing her eyes go glassy. "I won't," Raven says, and breaks the vision herself by biting her tongue until she tastes iron. Pain crowds the image out. She shoves the lip of the breach shut with both hands. The bowl chips. She doesn't care. Robin makes the smallest mistake he makes all day. He hears the name the apostle spoke and repeats the first syllable in his head to see if it fits a pattern. It does. The thought is harmless. It gives the blade a place to land. The apostle cuts again. Not the baton, not the cup. His edge slides into Robin's thought like a thin wedge into wood. The wedge sticks. It doesn't split him. It lodges there, a doubt that wasn't his before. It says, "What if mercy makes you late by one breath? It will be louder later. It is quiet now." He does not know it yet. He feels off. He adjusts and files the feeling under. Not now. The pariah at Starfire's shoulder tries to feed on her light and cannot because there is no flame to drink. She muscles it a step to the left and it collides with a pillar. Stone chips skitter. It looks at her with its absent face and she looks back with pity. She does not weaponize. Cyborg's coil gun runs dry. He slaps in a magazine with hands that want to shake and do not. He shoots the palanquin again. Another clamp fails. The whole structure lists, and the apostle is suddenly a man on a bad ladder. Beast Boy turns into a hawk and slashes at the page with his talons. He tears 2 letters from a word that was doing work. The work stops. The book stutters. The apostle's helm snaps toward him. If looks could, this would. They cannot. The blade can. It scythes up, faster than before, and Beast Boy would be too, if Robin didn't kick the blades flat at full extension. The edge nicks Beast Boy's skin at the hip. He screams. The scream isn't from pain. It's from the part of him that always knows his shape, not knowing it for a blink. He's a boy again, curled around nothing. He breathes through it, slow. He finds himself. The palanquin shudders. The apostle makes a hand sign in the air. It is not a gesture for the warp. It is a signal for retreat. His word-bearers obey at once because doctrine loves living to preach again. He steps back, and the blade draws one last line in Raven's shadow. It sets a hook. It will pull later. He looks at Robin one last time. "You will decide late," he says, and steps into smoke that rises from no fire. The pariahs drift with him. The book closes. The palanquin grinds into a corner and sticks halfway, then vanishes because it was never fully here except in promise. Silence drains slow off the stones. The lullaby stops on a breath. Raven sags. The bowl holds. The seam is not a mouth. She is smiling with nothing but relief when blood drools from both nostrils in a sheet, and she blinks and goes boneless. Starfire catches her, and the light in Starfire's hands looks like morning because it is only light, not power. "I have you," she says, and it is true in all the ways it can be. Codex note. An anatheme, keyed with hexagrammic true word strikes along the target's identity vector, creating a wound in the psyche's boundary that bleeds, will rather than blood, and resists Medicae aid until sealed by sanctified oath or equivalent soulcraft. Holt steps forward and takes Raven's wrist like a medic would, then doesn't pretend she can read that pulse. She looks at Robin and doesn't look away. "This is the price," she says. "This and worse if we misjudge." Robin nods once. He is an iron line right now. He will bend later. "We didn't misjudge," he says. "We just haven't paid all of it yet." Kess seals the processional with work lights and tape that says nothing in any language and means, "Do not go through here." She turns to a sister whose voice led the lullaby. "Sister," she says, softer than she was with anyone that day. "Keep singing." The sister nods and starts again with no words, just breath in notes. Cyborg runs a scan over Raven without touching her. His numbers don't help. He stops and puts a big hand on her shoulder. "You're here," he says, and the words are as much for him as for her. Beast Boy sits with his back against a pillar and breathes until his shape stops ticking. He looks at the nick at his hip. It doesn't bleed. It itches like a lie. He doesn't scratch it because scratching will make it mean more. He makes a face like a child refusing dessert. "No," he tells the itch. "Not yours." Starfire's shoulder throbs. She catalogues the hurt and sets it aside with practiced joy. "We won this place," she says to no one, and to the cathedral, and to the part of the sky that was watching. Holt is the one who names what comes next. She doesn't do it as threat. She does it as necessity. "You have touched our war with your hands," she says, looking at the Titans each in turn. "You bleed our way. That blade in her is not for Helsreach to treat, nor for me. This has to go to the source." Kest hears it, and her face does its own small fight. "Terra," she says, and the word tastes like rust and gold. "The throne." Alaric inclines his head a degree. "Judgment," he says. "It is not triumph. It is duty." Robin closes his eyes a second, opens them, nods. He doesn't like the thought of leaving a square he taught himself to love in a day. He doesn't like a court. He can't plan. He likes that the blade in Raven will be seen by something that doesn't lie to itself about what knives do. "Not a court," Holt says, hearing his shoulders tense. "An audience and a measure. You will not be bound to a path without choice, but you will be weighed." Raven stirs. Her voice is sand. "He tried to name me," she says. "He didn't, but he found a hook. I don't want to bleed on your floor." "You won't," Starfire says, and this time there is steel under the warmth. Holt's gaze softens and hardens. "A Navy frigate in high anchor can run you to a rendezvous with a fast courier," she says. "From there to Segmentum Command. With my seal, then onward. Kest looks at the square, and then at the Titans, and then at the square again. She is a soldier who has learned to let go of good assets when the war needs them somewhere else. We can hold with what you taught us, she says. We won't be pretty. We'll be alive. Marshal Krell rolls her shoulders. And lawful, she adds. On the days we can afford it. Robin nods. He looks at a boy who is cleaning a gun with shaking hands and tells him where to put the oil because no one ever told him. And that is a sin, and easy to fix. He looks at Holt and doesn't thank her because they're not friends. He respects her because she didn't shoot them. That is enough today. Starfire bends over Raven and brushes blood from her lip with a thumb. The smear is red and black because of the way light lies when it comes from inside. You will see a throne made of gold, she says softly. Do not be impressed. Raven's mouth tilts, and that almost smile is the bravest thing in the processional. I won't, she says. I know better thrones. The sky mutters. The Navy voice arrives dry. Enemy warband withdrawing to high ash lanes, it says. We read a ritual build-up we cannot pass. Might be a memorial, might be a trap. My captain advises we call that the same thing. Holt's jaw eases. They'll write a vengeance, she says. They can have the last word in a bad paragraph. We'll write the next one later. Cyborg bundles a package of data for Kest. Structural weaknesses with sticky notes, power roots that don't explode when shot, voice filters that catch obvious hymns. He pushes it across like someone handing down recipes. Here, he says. It's messy. It works. Kest takes it like sacrament. I'll teach it forward, she says. If I live. Beast Boy morphs a canteen into a cooling pack and presses it to his own side. He grins at the sister who sang. That was a good song, he says. What's it called? She shrugs. It's about boats, she says. And her eyes smile with lines that weren't there yesterday. Holt raises her vox and speaks into channels that obey. Navy, prepare shuttle with null-buffered medici berth, she says. Marshal, you hold the processional. General, you hold the square. Templar, you don't crusade beyond the streets we can watch. If you must swing a sword to sleep, swing it on patrol. Alaric nods once. I have discipline, he says, and means it. Robin helps load Raven into a cradle that looks like it holds relics for roots that shake. He wipes his bloody glove on his pants again. He looks back at the cathedral and lets himself memorize the mess of it. Candles stuck to railings, a saint missing a hand, 3 words of a lullaby caught in the stone. Starfire kisses her fingers and lays the kiss on a child's hair without touching the child. Shine, she says, even if no one sees. Cyborg locks the square into his head like a map he will revisit in the quiet and pretend to fix again. Beast Boy waves at a medic who waves back with both hands because one of them shakes when it's still. The shuttle sets down with the gentle arrogance of Navy gear. Holt boards last. She looks back at Kest. Rank meets rank without flinch. If they come back while I'm away, Holt says, you are my hand. Kest snorts. I am my own, she says. I'll lend you fingers. The shuttle lifts. Helsreach drops away into orange haze. The hole they made by arriving looks like a bruise from up here. The city looks like a wound that decided to scar instead of rot. Robin straps in. He lets his head fall back and stares at the shuttle ceiling until it stops being a pallet for thoughts and becomes just metal. He hears the apostle's sentence again. You will decide late. He files it under vaccines that need 2 doses. He will make it wrong by planning early and then earlier. Raven closes her eyes and looks at the cut in her shadow from the inside. It looks like a word written wrong. She could try to erase it. She doesn't. She sketches a line around it that says, not yours. The line will not hold forever. It will hold long enough. Starfire takes her hand. Beast Boy puts his foot against Robin's boot and presses until the contact says, "We're here." Cyborg opens a panel and kills the last kind feature in his systems for the flight. Cold Iron hums. He is a machine and a man, and both will do. Holt watches them without pity and without contempt. She is a blade in a sheath because blades must be sheathed between uses. She feels something like a prayer rise and refuses to shape it into words. She will do that in a quieter room, or not at all. Above the cloud, the frigate waits with its nose pointed toward a bright line where the void runs thin. It is not the way to Terra yet. It is the way to someone who will decide whether they get to try. The wound in the story is open. It bleeds light and doubt. The city they left keeps its breath. The choice they cannot avoid rides with them, quiet as a coin in a pocket. They go where thrones sit. They do not bow yet. Recap. They leave Helsreach carrying a blade wound that bleeds will, a promise not to reach, and a plan to be weighed where thrones sit. The frigate runs dark along the ash lanes until stars return as points and not smoke. The Geller field hums through the hull like a choir forced to sing in tune. Medically lay Raven in a null-buffered berth whose edges are etched with hexagram lines and old prayers rubbed thin by use. Starfire sits with her, palms over Raven's, not shining, only warm. Cyborg opens his own chest panel beneath a glow lumen and reroutes without muttering. Every wire is a decision he wishes he didn't have to make. Beast Boy naps the way wounded animals do. One ear open, one foot touching the base of Robin's seat. Robin cleans baton fragments with slow hands, cataloguing where the stress ran. He files the lesson and chooses not to mourn the stick, because the hand still works. Holt stands in the Shuttle Bay Chapel, where saints are carved from ship plate, their faces beaten out of dents. She doesn't kneel. She watches a candle gutter and right itself. The tiny victory pleases her like a report that comes in on time. Robin finds her because he has questions that will only fester if left in the dark. Doctrine wants her collared, he says without preamble. Cost wants her free. I need the version of you that argues both with equal skill. Holt takes a half breath and shifts her weight, not to soften her stance but to change angles. Collaring keeps cities from screaming when witches scream, she says, occupying doctrine first. It saves dull, ordinary lives you never meet. It makes future triage less bloody. It also produces weapons that forget their names and handlers that forget they hold a leash. She turns the blade in her mouth. Leaving her free risks a hole when she falters. It lets enemy doctrine write sermons in the space behind her eyes. It also gives you the only kind of speed that matters, the moment someone you trust chooses right, without waiting for a seal. Robin nods. So your vote? My vote is weighed, not cast, Holt says. On the throne, not here. She looks over his shoulder at the berth where Raven lies with Starfire's hands on hers. But if the Emperor leaves it to me, I will write a clause that binds all of you harder than a collar binds one of you. He doesn't thank her. He files the shape of that clause against the wedge the Apostle left in his thought. The voyage is short and long at once. The frigate makes a kiss with a courier whose bones are thin and mean. They strap into acceleration couches with rosary straps, and no one speaks for a while because breath is work under those G-forces. The old songs in the Geller hum change key when the courier's engines bite warp like something you only taste once. Raven's eyelids flicker. Starfire leans closer without speaking. Closeness is language enough. Halfway between ash and gold, the lights go honest white and then bruise. Gravity takes a step sideways. The deck tilts 1 degree off true, like a world that forgot its manners. Alarms do not ring. The air simply knows new rules. Holt's hand goes to her rosette before she stops it. Habit is a poor master and a good friend. Interdictor wells, Cyborg says, eyes narrowing as analog needles twitch. Not navy, tune sloppy. Someone's playing with a crown. The void outside thickens into shapes, and out of those not quite angles, a ship slides like a blade meant for rooms, not battles. Its hull is black and ridged with noctilit. Its prow bears a sigil that is not an aquila, but thinks it should be allowed. It is a black ship that chose a new name without asking. Quietus Absoluta, stenciled in a font that's all certainty. Boarding clamps kiss hard. The courier's captain swears in a language Holt doesn't know. Holt doesn't need vocabulary to get the gist. Pressure seals lock and hiss. The ramp drops on a whisper of cold. They come on with steps that do not echo. Armor that drinks sound rather than makes it. Sisters of silence in ash white plate form the frame of a doorway the air has to use. Behind them walks their captain, bareheaded, scalp tattooed in geometric calm, eyes the color of nothing in a good well. Verena Solicer. She is younger than Holt expected, and older than the day makes her look. Between two sisters, a figure moves like memory. Armor like the sisters, but wrong at the edges. The sigil's not hexagrammatic, but subtraction. A halo device of blackstone headdress that doesn't shine. Her face is a miracle of stillness. She carries no weapon, and everything about her is one. The medici in the bay forget to breathe until their bodies remember their jobs. Witch in custody, Solace says. Voice not cruel. By the Black Mandate and the wars that followed, psychers of unknown provenance surrender their breath to the quiet for weighing and burning. I will take her. Holt's chin lifts a millimeter. By the Hereticus Mandate, I counterclaim, she says, rosette at her breast like a verdict's punctuation. Subject Raven is bound for throne audience under my seal, with escort and clause unsaid. Your mandate yields to mine until Terra says otherwise. Solace's gaze ticks to the birth. Raven opens her eyes and meets that nothing color without flinching. Starfire does not move. Her hands stay on Raven's. Robin doesn't move. His posture changes one atom at a time into something that is not a threat and not anything else either. Subject, Solace says to Raven. Not cruel, not kind. You leak. Raven nods. A little, she says. I am holding the seam so it doesn't sing. Solace studies the skin between Raven's eyebrows. The line there is new. It looks like a stress fracture in porcelain. I can end it, she says. You will never leak again. You will never love again. You will never be used again. You will not be you. The galaxy will be safer by one knife. Starfire inhales. The sound she makes is not a sob and not a growl. It is a boundary when wind hits a cliff. That is not mercy, she says softly. That is deletion. Solace's eyes go to Starfire, cataloguing heat, mapping threat, dismissing it not because it is small, but because it is irrelevant. My order is mercy, she says. For the many. Holt steps between the two like an equation thrown on the table. Captain Solace, she says, using rank like a bridge. I will not pretend I haven't wanted your tool in bad nights. I will not pretend you are wrong to ask. But the seal is mine and the road is forward. Solace gives Holt that long look soldiers give officers to see if they are real. Forward is the place we send things we do not want to look at, she says. Forward to fire. Let me finish the burn here. Robin hears another meaning inside the line and chooses to let it sit. If you collar her now, he says, speaking as a human and not an office, you don't end the wound. You end the hand that is currently holding it shut. Your hands fail, Solace replies without malice. All hands fail. My sisters catch what falls. That is our work. Cyborg flicks his eyes to analog gauges that wiggle in ways he doesn't like. They've got an interdictor field tuned to press our walls into our spines, he says low. Don't fight them in their gravity. Beast Boy rolls off the bench and puts himself at Raven's feet with his knees up and his shoulders loose. He looks like he is stretching. He looks like a boy who will become a bear if a sister takes one more step. The figure between the sisters takes one pace forward. It's like a shadow stepped out of a frame. She stands before Raven and cocks her head the way birds do when they find a shiny thing. "I was you," she says, voice even thinner than the hull. "Before the mask took the path that bled, I remember choosing. You can choose earlier than I did. Save a city I didn't save." Raven studies the woman's face. There is no hatred in her for the thing that took her, because there is not much of anything left. Raven feels a chill at her spine that is not the null. "What did it cost?" she asks, even though she can see the bill. "Me," the woman says without shame. "The last page, the last word. But no more knives found homes in people who never asked to bleed. That is enough." Raven looks at Starfire, at Robin, at Vic and Gar. Their faces are maps of a world she chooses to live in, even when it hurts. She shakes her head once. "Not yet," she says. "If I fail, you can have my last page. Not before." Solace doesn't sigh. Her shoulders tilt as if to make room for a breath. "You'll not yet become someone else's never," she says. "Sister Major, apply the mask." Two sisters step. Gnolls flooding the air so thick the candle flames in the chapel gutter and lie down. Raven's soul self flutters like a bird in a box, with no air. Starfire's skin cools to something like ordinary. Robin's balance becomes the only thing that moves right. Holt's hand twitches toward her pistol and stops an inch shy because shooting Sisters of Silence in a chapel is a chapter you don't write unless you're already dead. A presence enters the bay that is not a step and not a voice and not light. It is weight without mass, heat without fire, a smell like fresh metal under old incense, and something that doesn't have words. The lumen strips hiss and then glow steady as if embarrassed for having flickered. The hexagram lines etched in the birth's threshold rise like ink under a black light. Holt's rosette warms until she hisses between her teeth. Solace's eyes widen not in fear but in comprehension. She kneels as if gravity remembered her. The choir does what obedience does best. They stop. A soundless pattern unfurls in the air above the deck. The shape of an eagle seen from inside its bones, not feathers but vectors, not a picture but a command. No mouth speaks. In every head in the bay, a sentence writes itself and already knows it is true. Reach the throne. Solace bows her head until her scalp tattoos touch her gauntlet. When she stands, nothing about her is less certain. She is simply certain in another direction. "The palace speaks," she says, and the lack of sarcasm makes it more dangerous. "You go." The figure who was a mirror tilts her head at Raven, as if listening to a song that only plays for one person. "If you fail," she says, not threatening, only measuring, "I will be there." She steps back into the frame of sisters. The interdictor wells unwind. The ship named after silence withdraws without turning. Holt exhales through her teeth and moves her rosette 2 ribs to the left, where it will not burn her. "If we live through all our good decisions," she says, "I will write today down as a miracle I still don't like." The courier knives for Luna and the defensive grid around Saul burns gold on every spectrum. Macro constructs fold like origami in the void, battle stations with angels for ribs and guns for wings. The phalanx is a rumor today, not a sight. The ring of fortresses around Saturn glints once as if winking at their smallness and their speed. The Astronomicon towers from Terra like a column of music that would break them if it touched. It doesn't touch. It allows. They dock at the Lionsgate spaceport, where the air tastes like history and gun oil. The procession forms itself as if written into stone. Custodians in auramite, like sunlight, forged into men. Their halberds singing quiet harmonics. Sisters of silence at quarter points. Nulls like cool wells that keep the air from lying. Skittery with censer masks bowed so that brass prayers can drip into their cogitators. A litany of arrival rolls along the concourse. Chant conducted by servo skulls whose little blunt wings stir the incense into spirals. A shield captain takes one step forward, and 1,000 years of training take the rest of his body with it. By the throne's command, he says, and his voice fills the room without the courtesy of an echo. You will be weighed. Holt stands half a pace back from the Titans and half a pace forward of herself. Under my seal, she says out of habit. The shield captain's gaze flickers to the rosette and returns to her eyes. He has seen more seals than anyone alive, and it does not impress him. It doesn't offend him either. It is a fact. He nods a degree. That is permission to keep her dignity. They pass under arches carved with wars that never ended, and saints whose miracles are listed like casualty figures. Raven keeps her head up as they walk through null shadow. The wound in her shadow hums, wants to be a habit, tries to pull eyes. Starfire's hand hovers near her elbow and doesn't touch, because touch is not the right language in this hall. Cyborg's footsteps change tone as they shift from adamantine to basalt, to something that rings like thin glass. He tightens his gait to stop thinking about how far he would fall if the floor stopped being honest. Beast Boy counts statues never to 10 more than once and jokes under his breath without words. Robin marks exits, sight lines, guard temperaments. None of that matters, and all of it does, because he will always plan. They enter a chamber that is a geometry of surrender. Hexagram plates inlaid with sigils no one living understands. A bowl of light suspended from nothing that is not lamp but presence, made gentler for flesh minds. Around the circle stand blanks in ash white, their faces blank canvas. They do not project, they absorb. Custodians take stations like the cardinal points of a compass that remembers which way north hurts. No throne sits here. This is not the place where gold burns bones to keep a light lit. This is the place where that light touches the world without turning it to math. Holt feels the thought like a draft. You came to ask without knowing what you are asking. She bows her head because pride here is ignorance. The light changes when Raven steps into it. Not brighter, truer. The cut in her shadow shows itself in a way that makes everyone there see it the same way and feel their own tools itch for a fix. No one moves. The weight arrives without moving air. It is not a voice. It is the absence of excuses. Robin hears nothing and sees a ledger in his head open to a page where dates have not yet been written. A column for haste, a column for mercy, a column for foolishness. A number near a line item he recognizes. Late one breath. Moves a digit and then stops. He doesn't know if it went up or down. He knows he wants it to stop moving because he is watching. Starfire feels the light, like an old sun filtered through water that remembers when it was clean. It shows her faces she saved by standing still and faces she could have saved by moving faster. It does not condemn. It counts. She breathes and tells the count a story. We will do better with the next breath. Cyborg hears silence where scrap code used to hum in the deep background of his augmetics. It is not emptiness. It is a room where no one yells. A diagram arises behind his eyes and maps the distance between tool and will. The distance is shorter than he lied to himself it was. He can live with that. He must. Beast Boy feels shapes trying to fuzz. The shame in him that says be a joke so no one asks you for the hard thing. The light takes the fuzz and hands him edges. He laughs once, real. It sounds wrong in the chamber. No one rebukes him. He files the sound as something he is allowed to make here. Raven stands in the bowl and feels the hook the apostle said tug once, twice, testing knots. The tug doesn't stop because she is in a holy room. It grows clearer. The light shows her what the hook is, not just a cut, but a definition spelled wrong. The fix is not force. The fix is a name. No one speaks it for her. The wait waits, not indifferent, simply certain that waiting is part of the work. Holt cannot explain what she receives because it is not her day. She is allowed to witness a sentence she can't write, and to feel it settle into law she will enforce without comment. Tears run down her face and salt the rosette's edge. She does not notice until the salt dries. They are not there long because time does not work in here the same way. When they step back, the bowl seems the same. They are not. The light retracts to a size politeness prefers. The shield captain's head inclines a degree, and Null's eyelids lower and lift. Somewhere deeper in the palace, a machine that hates movement moves one thin hair. Power scaling. Interlude. 2. Under sanction. Raven may anchor and deny with precision. Any reach beyond ward or scene closure accrues measurable corruption debt that must be discharged by oath-bound rights or withdrawn time under Null watch. Starfire's emissions are licensed for mass impulse and ablative shielding in civilian perimeters. Plasma release against Imperial subjects is prescribed unless authorized by a sealed, witnessed exigency. Cyborg's augmetics are ritually cold-bonded. No assimilation of heretic code. No communion with warp-adjacent substrates. His systems run with sanctified noise that foils scrap code at the cost of finesse. Beast Boy's morphic window near blanks is shortened and grounded. No warp native or mythical forms, only fauna with bone and breath. Prolonged shapes under null bleed. Risk identity slippage. Monitored by companion witness. Robin holds a custodial writ, keyed to a specific seal. He can interpose to suspend doctrinal force in his immediate operational radius when civilian blood price exceeds tactical gain, subject to later review by the hand that signed the light. They do not receive words, but objects are offered. A wafer of auramite, etched with sigils that look like stairs and like fences, is placed in Holt's palm. A ring of iron that has never known rust, its inner edge inscribed with hexagram lines smaller than hair, is set near Raven's berth. She will choose if she will wear it. A wire-tied booklet of blank cards is handed to Robin. Each card is a permission he will sign away one by one if he uses them. A woven thread of gold and black is tied around Starfire's wrist by a custodian whose hands are careful. It warms once when she thinks of burning everything for one person. A band for Cyborg's forearm is clamped by a Magos who hums the sound of cool. The band radiates a tone that scrambles hymns. Beast Boy receives nothing at first, and then his sister steps to him and places her palm against his chest, and nods once, as if touching a heartbeat is a gift that goes both ways. He nods back, solemn, uncharacteristically so. Holt bows this time, small. The shield captain makes no gesture. He turns and the hall moves with him. They exit under banners that list the names of 1,000 worlds pronounced right for once. Outside the gate, Terra smells like dust and a large machine that needs oil and gets blood. The sky over the palace is not sky. It is gold reflected in a city's tears. On the shuttle back to the courier, silence is not awkward. It is weight settling into joints. Robin thumbs through the blank cards without reading the sigils. He counts them, because counting makes him remember not to spend them, because they are finite. Starfire holds her thread-wrapped wrist against her cheek and breathes once in and once out, tasting iron and citrus. Cyborg taps the forearm band and listens to the silence it makes. It is music he didn't know he needed. Beast Boy watches Raven and waits until she opens her eyes before he smiles, so she can decide if she wants to be in a world with smiles right now. Raven opens her eyes and looks at the iron ring. It is not a collar. It is a question she can put on her finger and take off again with fewer scars than a collar would give. Later, she says, to the ring and to herself. Starfire's mouth curves. Holt doesn't urge. She learns something about force and timing in a room when neither mattered. They lift. Lucifer engines hot. They fall through the soul light and into ordinary stars. The courier takes the lane the palace gave. It is a straight line that is not short, and it points back toward a hive city that decided to scar rather than rot. The weight they carry is not lighter. It fits better. The bruise in the sky where they opened a way is still there over Helsreach. The apostle has not run out of sermons. The men who shoot at children have not forgotten how. The people who hold shields will hold them again. The next breath costs. They bought enough to take it. Recap. They left gold with a writ that is not a leash, a thread on a wrist, an iron ring that is a question, and a cut in a shadow that knows their names. The courier shivers into Helsreach's ash. The bruise in the sky is still there, puckered and quiet. The city meets them with fewer sirens and more orders barked by tired voices that have learned brevity. Kest's perimeter holds. Krell's shields are dented in the right places. Candles burn down to brave stubs. The lullaby has a second verse now. Holt hears the Navy captain's tone and knows a bad hour has a worse cousin. Warband massing, the Vox says, dries. Reading apostolic signature at Triad of Manufactoria. They're going to flip a saint. Starfire looks at the bruise and then at the square. We go to the worst hurt first, she says. Robin nods. Raven sets her jaw and shapes her breath into a tool. Cyborg taps his band and listens to the silence it makes. Beast Boy grins at a child and the grin is for both of them. They move through alleys that remember the banners. Graffiti has appeared where soot allowed. Little chalk marks of an aquila with a bar through it that looks like a T. No one claims them. Everyone knows what they mean. A sister of silence walks past one and doesn't scrape it off. That is policy by grace or fatigue. It is still policy. The Triad of Manufactoria meets at a yard paved in plates stamped with prayers. The prayers are upside down. A scaffolding of black stone arcs across the open. 3 crowns trying to be one. The word bearers stand in ranks like a choir that learned time signatures no one should. The dark apostle waits atop a dais made from a saint's disassembled jaw. Holt touches her rosette and then lets her hand drop. This is where sermons break, she says. Not for them, for herself, so she doesn't forget. The apostle turns his helm and the Vox grill smiles without moving. Back for benediction, he says. I brought 3 homilies, 1 for each time you deny what you are. Raven steps forward until the null shadows from pariah screens lick her boots. Her iron ring rides in her pocket and weights the cloth like a tiny planet. Name your knives, she says, very calm. We'll blunt them. He lifts the blade and lets light bend along it. He opens the book and flips to a page that smells like rain on ruins. He raises his free hand palm up as if offering bread to pigeons. Choice, cost, covenant, he says. You can leave and forget and doom us to repeat. You can stay and split the city along a line called mercy, or you can kneel and be useful until nothing of you is left but function. Pick which crowd you disappoint. The field trembles like air above an oven. The sound of the city dims. Something vast and patient unrolls inside Raven's skull like a map she could walk. It isn't the apostle. It's the memory of gold that does not care if it is pretty. It shows 3 roads without comment. On the first, they step through the seam and it seals like skin. Faces blur in months and years. The bruise in the sky fades. Raven's hair darkens. Beast Boy's laugh is easy. Starfire gardens in a balcony that smells like fruit. Cyborg builds a school that hums right. Robin sleeps enough to dream. The city on this road is not Helsreach. Helsreach burns down without them and is rebuilt by strangers who do not sing the lullaby. The child with the puppy grows older anyway and learns the lesson that you cannot count on saviors. The memory fade is kind and cruel. The road is safe and sterile. It is real. On the second, they stay as they are. No sanction, no clause. Holt picks fights with priests. Krell picks fights with knights. Kest picks fights with sleep. The Titans keep saving people and breaking doctrine, and the fault line becomes a border. On one side, candles. On the other, codices. Mercy wins days and loses months. Someone dies because a line moved wrong. A patrol shoots an emblem on a wall. A riot sings itself into a massacre. The schism is not cinematic. It is paperwork and empty shelves. The road ends in a city that keeps living, smaller. It is real. On the third, they take the sanction and the rules bite back. The writ warms when Robin argues the blood price clause. Raven wears the iron, and it cools her hand when she twitches towards Reach. Starfire's thread burns once when she almost decides to be a star for one life. Cyborg's band thrums when Scrapcode whispers. Beast Boy learns to love the shapes that have bones and breath. Holt says no to people she pities and yes to ones she dislikes because the writ says so. The Apostle loses doctrine here, not glory. The city buys time in orderly coins. Freedom bends but does not break. The road ends in a world where mercy is in the rulebook. It is real. Raven breathes out and in. She chooses the third road, not because it is noble, because it is honest about harm and harvest. We accept sanction, she says. We bind ourselves to a clause and to each other. The Apostle lifts his blade as if saluting. Then bleed, he says, and drops his hand. Everything moves at once. Pariah screams, swell like lungs at the four corners. A hurricane of silence pushes toward Raven's cup. She anchors and does not reach. The iron ring in her pocket hums and settles on a finger by itself. It is cold and then warm and leaves a circle of clean honesty in her skin. Starfire steps to the left and makes herself wait where children cluster behind a shield wall. Bullets and bolts and shards hit her and move away. Her thread prickles once, hard, when a single voice screams her mother's name. She does not shine. She stands. The thread cools. Cyborg raises a lattice of hard light and then lowers it again, because the band on his forearm buzzes a warning at the hidden hymn braided inside it. He goes analog. Rebar brace, winch line, coil gun without elegance. He eats angles and gives back math that keeps men standing. Beast Boy keeps it simple and mean. Wolf to knock a knee. Man to drag a woman out from a bad groove. Tortoise to take a hit that would have broken a child at the hip. He avoids shapes his heart wants because the field wants to make him forget he has one. Robin lifts the booklet of blank cards. He doesn't spend one yet. He holds the writ in his head like the handle of a valve and feels the city's pressure through it. He runs. He calls shots like a conductor whose orchestra fights wolves during the piece. The Apostle descends the dais with a patience that insults urgency. He writes Raven's not name in the air again, but the letters smear. The ring on her hand hums and the smear dries before it sets. He cuts at her shadow and the cut lands on his book edge instead. He glances at it and sees a tiny line there that matches the line in her. He smiles as if he found a hair in his teeth. Cray-Eye's shields take the first wave. Kest's mortars cough once, twice, never thrice without order. Holt snaps a shot at a handler's mouth and doesn't think about metaphor for once. The sisters of a local order, no bolters, only bandages and bad tempers, pull bleeding men backward by their collars and call them names in a language that makes Beast Boy smile even now. A word, bearer with a relic lance tries to drive it into the ground to make the ground lie. Raven steps one pace to the left, and the lance finds a seam that isn't there, and the lie refuses to land. The Marine looks confused, which is human, and then angry, which is doctrine. He swings at her head. Starfire is there, and the swing hits weight that moves not at all. The pariah screens move toward Holt like weather. She doesn't step into them. She calls orders that assume she cannot hear herself, and the orders still work. She points at a Templar about to be brave in a bad way. "Hold," she says. Her voice hits his helm as a word with the exact weight of the writ Robin has not spent. He holds. It saves a squad. He pretends later it was his idea. Holt will not correct him. The Apostle reaches the yard's center and raises his book high. The Blackstone Arcs take that as permission and sing. A cold line that wants to be a law. Cyborg's band howls in a note only he hears. He bares his teeth and shoves a coilgun slug through a resonant joint. The note wobbles. Beast Boy becomes a gorilla and tears a brace free with both hands, and a noise he learned in a zoo he hated. The arc sags. A gap opens where a foolish person could dive and a smart person should. Robin is the latter and dives anyway, because mercy loses if he doesn't. He lands in a space the Apostle marked as an argument and puts his body there as the answer. He feels the wedge in his thought twist. Late by one breath, it whispers, "Reasonable." He spends a card. The booklet flares once. An ink that wasn't ink burns a sigil into the air, a circle with a bar and two wings. The air around Robin stiffens into civility. Black Templars halt mid-lunge. Arbites stop a reflex swing. A word-bearer's shot goes wide because the man behind him remembers a child near a cot. The writ suspends doctrine for 3 breaths wherever he stands. 3 breaths are a lot when you plan early and earlier. He uses them to shout the blood price clause loud enough to be remembered later. All Imperial fire inside this yard goes to metal, not meat, he says, by sanction and seal. The clause takes and writes itself across 3 officers' spines. Holt feels it settle and lets it. She will answer for it later. Good. The Apostle laughs, a short please sound. You bend their scripture with your own, he says. See how fast home kitchens pick up your recipe. Raven's breath is a metronome. The cut in her shadow tugs like a fish on a line she holds in both hands. She cannot erase it. She can bind it with a name she hasn't spoken. She knows it now. She tasted it in the bowl of light. It is not a true name because no one gets that. But it is true enough. She says it under her breath. Daughter of second chances. The tug eases and returns like tides. Starfire moves like a door that never slams. She places herself where bullets would end small stories. A sister glances up at her with a face that looks for gods and sees a woman standing still. The sister makes a note in her heart rather than in a book. That is theology in this city now. Cyborg shifts the lattice in his head and sends weight to where metal declares it will fail. He is not a hero right now. He is a beam. He will be proud of this later in a deep way that has nothing to do with glory. Beast Boy climbs an arc like a child on a jungle gym in a city that forgot to build parks. He wedges himself in the wrong place on purpose, and the wrong place becomes a right brace. He aches everywhere. He laughs at himself because the laugh is the difference between pain and damage. The Apostle stops smiling. He writes faster. He speaks the misname louder. The pariah field deepens into a pool. Raven feels her cup flex and flex again. The ring on her finger grows heavy. She closes her eyes and sees gold and sees ash and sees her mother's hands and her father's eyes and the girl who touched a dog ear and laughed. Enough, she says to the blade and the book and the man and to herself, and she makes a promise that is a wall. I will anchor, I will deny, I will not reach unless the innocent die if I do not. I will count the cost and pay it in public. I will bind the wound and keep my name. The ring warms and seals on her finger with a click no one hears. The cut in her shadow stops bleeding and becomes a scar the size of a finger bone. It will itch in storms. It will not own her. The bowl of light in a room far away flares when no one sees it. The ledger in Robin's head clicks one notch toward paid. Holt feels a clause finish writing on her sternum. When she asks for too much, she will know. Kest hears the promise as a ceiling she can push against and not break. Krell hears it as a law she can interpret with mercy and still call law. The apostle feels it as failure. He snarls and brings the blade down for a wound that doesn't care about vows. Robin is there because he planned early and earlier. He catches the wrist, not the edge, and feels something in his shoulder complain, in a voice he will hear for a week. The blade kisses stone and sparks without light. Beast Boy drops from the ark as a bear the size of Wrong, and the dais cracks. Starfire steps and her weight turns a stutter into a fall. Cyborg empties the coil gun, and the last slug hits the black stone seam that holds the three crowns as one. The seam unbinds with a noise like a choir remembering it has throats. The crowns fall out of tune. Scrapcode howls and then drowns in the band's white hush. The pariah pool craps out into smaller puddles. Raven's cup stops shaking. The word bearers retreat again, because doctrine loves living to preach. The apostle stays one breath longer because pride does. He looks at Raven and at the ring and at the scar and at the emblem in the air that looks like a T with wings and a circle around it. You named yourself, he says, and the way he says it is almost fond. We will teach your name to others and make it a door. Raven's mouth curves in a small, tired, mean smile that makes Starfire want to kiss her for the humor of it. Teach it wrong, she says. Watch your doors open on walls. He leaves in smoke that isn't, stepping through a gap knitted to him and to his god. Holt raises her pistol and lowers it, because this is a type of target pistols don't solve. The yard settles in messy triumph. Pariah screens skitter back like shamed ghosts. The crowns hang dead and heavy. People cry the way you do when you didn't die. The lullaby catches again from somewhere you can't see. The child with the puppy ear onto her palm is holding a bandage roll like a trophy. Kest walks up to Robin and puts a hand on his shoulder without asking if it hurts. You wrote a rule and made it work, she says. I will write it down twice. Marshal Krell thumps her more, and the sound is a law and a comfort. Anyone who shot at the wrong thing today can write their names on my list, she says. We will go over it tomorrow and learn to be better, or learn to love scrubbing stones. Starfire touches Raven's ring, and it warms once more under her finger, like a living thing. You chose your fence, she says. I will sit with you on it when the wind is unkind. Cyborg leans his head back and stares at the crowns until his eyes water. We didn't make it pretty, he says. We made it less murderous. I'll take that. Beast Boy sits in the cracked jaw of a saint and swings his legs. He watches a sister scold a Templar for bleeding on her clean bandages and laughs on purpose because the world is better when that happens in it. Holt looks tired all at once. She is not smaller for it. Your clause, she says to Robin, voice hoarse, will be reviewed. I will argue for it with the weight it earned. Don't make me regret the coin. I won't, he says. And he means today, and he means next winter, and he means the year after. The square fills with work instead of panic. Fires are put out with water and with hands. Men who shouted heresy an hour ago carry cots because their throats are sore. A Templar bandages an Arbite's palm, and they both pretend it is theology. At dusk, a shuttle floats down with crates that aren't bullets, filters, binders, toys wiped with boiled rags. Someone, we won't say who because heroes are better when they are a rumour, chalks the winged T-circle on a ruined buttress. No one salutes it, no one scrubs it off. It stays until rain makes it a ghost. Night hums. The bruise in the sky fades to a freckle. The seam Raven holds stops being an obsession and becomes something she checks like a lock before sleep. She sits on a cathedral step with Starfire and holds a cup of thin soup with both hands because warmth goes through the cup and into the bones and says, "Stay." Cyborg is asleep in a chair like a defunct mech and will pretend he didn't later. Beast Boy sprawls on a tarp with a puppy curled against his ribs and a cat on his head because the city remembers how to be silly. Robin writes 3 tiny notes on 3 blank cards and tucks the booklet away. Holt writes her report with a pen that will outlast her bones and leaves room in the margins for a clause she intends to win. They fix what can be fixed before dawn. They leave the rest for morning. The choice is not the end. It is the rule of the next page. Weeks compress into paragraphs. The warband prowls and preaches and loses ground that looked like words. The lullaby becomes a working song. The winged T shows up on toolbox lids and on a child's wooden sword and on the back of a sister's glove where no one sees it but her. The clause gets teeth. A scrawled copy of it pinned to a watch post earns a grunted "good" from a Templar who would have sneered a month ago. Krell recruits men with short tempers and teaches them to move like hinges. Kest's mortars cough only when they must, and never when they want to make noise. Raven's scar itches in storms. Starfire's thread warms when she looks at a single face too long and cools when she remembers 100. Cyborg's band hums like a small comfort song when a scrapco tries to sing to him. He hums back without irony. Beast Boy keeps the bone and breath and finds new animals to love inside those rules. A Helsreach draft horse gets a kiss on the nose that the horse pretends to hate. Robin spends a second card on a day when a captain wants a street cleared at the price of 10 wounded. The writ snaps across the air like a towel and shame does the rest. Holt makes enemies that will sit on review boards and thank her through their teeth, because the numbers do not lie. News travels like mold and light. On a shrine world where fire is law, a cardinal in carmine hears about a witch who said, "I will not reach," and scowls and writes a sermon with a softer edge than his hand prefers. In a forge where metal gets names, a Magos runs Cyborg's band tone through filters and names it unpoetic but effective, and issues a quiet bulletin that sounds like poetry to anyone who knows what is at stake. In a fortress monastery, a sword brother named Alaric shows a chalk T to his chaplain and says nothing, and the chaplain says less, and they both think about blood and law. On a black ship's gallery, Verena Solis reads a report stamped with Holt's seal and rests her fingers on the margin of a clause that forbids shining for one when many will burn. She closes her eyes and remembers a laugh she heard in a cargo bay and thinks of what is saved by deletion and what might be saved by the more complicated mercy of measured choice. She orders nothing changed. She tells a sister to oil her blade. In the void between wars, the Dark Apostle opens his book to a page where a hair-thin line crosses a letter. He touches it with a gloved thumb. "Names," he murmurs. He raises his helm and looks at a sky that is not a god and smiles without teeth. He sends 3 warbands to 3 other hives and writes a new homily. How to make mercy into a trap. It is sloppy in places. It will kill good people. It will be improved by practice. He is patient. A child in Helsreach draws the winged T with the wrong number of feathers and then laughs because her mother draws it worse. She pets a green puppy that is a boy who claims he isn't tired and absolutely is. She falls asleep under a tree-ish table while a sister sings the boat song. She will be old before she understands what was decided above her head and inside other men's heads and inside a bowl of light. She will not forget the way the big woman stood still. The Titans stay until the bruise is a memory. They leave when staying would turn help into habit. They leave a clause written in stone and on paper and in the way men call a halt when a child runs. They leave tools that fit Helsreach hands. They leave an emblem that is not a brand, but a rumour you can draw on your own wall and not be wrong. When they go, the seam opens like a seam should, not a mouth. Raven steps through with the iron ring sleeping on her finger. Starfire looks back and smiles at the sky. Cyborg throws a last patch across a circuit that no one will thank him for and grins because the grid will hum cleaner. Beast Boy waves both hands and yells a joke that isn't very funny and makes 3 medics cry anyway. Robin presses his palm to Holt's shoulder just once because words are too heavy. Holt nods and doesn't look away. Krell salutes with her maul. Kest nods like someone who made an agreement with the day and kept it. From orbit, the hive looks like a stack of knives. A flight of Navy pilots sees a pattern painted in heat on the roofs. The Aquila reflected off a dozen plates. The bar that makes the tea thrown by a fallen crane. A circle traced by a water main repaired on purpose to leak steam just so at dawn. It looks like an emblem no one ordered. It looks like something that will wear off unless people keep remaking it with work. That is better than paint. Back in a city that is not ash, a boy who wants to be better sets an alarm for earlier and writes the blood price clause in a notebook. He doesn't show anyone. A woman who burns like a star when she chooses makes tea and watches the sunrise and chooses not to. A man with a band on his arm rewires a school. A girl with a scar that itches goes for a walk and refuses to cut a corner through a memory. A leader counts cards and hands them out to people he trusts, and never to people who want them most. The winged T shows up in places it shouldn't. On a ship's bulkhead, on a run that is all contraband and bread. On a Mechanicus slate as a formatting error. On a Templar's shield rim next to a nick that saved him from dying in a neat line. In a sister's notebook, in a hand that is usually too disciplined for doodles. The apostle hears reports that annoy him into excellence. He files the emblem into his book under new heresies to cultivate. He writes a lesson plan for acolytes on how to make merciful men late. He tells the serf to bring him a child who sings boat songs. The serf does not find that child because the city does not hand children to men who wear scripture like skin as easily as it did last month. The bowl of light burns steady. The room that holds it does not blink. An entry appears in a ledger with neat script. Clause tested, name bound, writ spent, 2 of 7, ring accepted, thread warmed, cooled, band effective, morphic bounded, city not lost, no hand writes it, no mouth reads it aloud. Law does not need applause. In a plaza where candles once guttered, a woman in carapace with a crimson sash speaks to a crowd without fear in her voice. We held, Kes says. We learn. We keep holding. A man with a maul hits stone once in approval. A sister smiles without showing teeth. A child boo sings the boat song to make a puppy dance. The bruise in the sky is gone. The seam is a seam. The emblem lives as a rumor and a habit.